Tonight, we'd like to make an announcement. We have a new Planning Commission member, Ms. Elizabeth Springer. Could you introduce yourself?
Push the button.
There we go. My name is Elizabeth Springer. I am a licensed professional engineer in Maryland and Pennsylvania. My background is heavy civil construction and design, bridges, highways, commercial buildings, and I also right now do residential design and engineering. And I live in the Rosemont section of Bryn Mawr, Radnor Township, and I work in that section as well.
Thank you very much and welcome. First on our agenda are the minutes of the meetings of February 4th and February 7th. Has everyone had a chance to review the minutes? And if so, can I have a motion? So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Okay. Okay. We'll now consider a petition from Villanova University to amend the zoning ordinance to provide for a new use, comprehensive integrated college development within the planned institutional zoning district. We looked at this last month, and it was tabled at that time, and then we're going to continue our discussion this evening. Nick?
Evening, everyone. Nick Cornelia representing Villanova. As you mentioned, this was before the board last month. It was tabled at that time. You asked us to come back with some additional information, which we will present this evening. As you know, the charge of the Planning Commission here is to make recommendations to the Board of Commissioners as to this ordinance and reasons for the recommendations. When we present here this evening, we will consider the ordinance, but also I know the board is interested in the impact the ordinance would have on the site, so we also would discuss the site itself and what plans there are on the site. The ordinance itself has the applicant designate a certain area that would be used for this type of development. And in this particular case for Villanova, the designation is this yellow gold type area that we indicate here, which is the current surface parking lots along Lancaster Avenue. Once the university designates that area for the ordinance, it is up to the Township Board of Commissioners to approve that by a conditional use. So it's just not a matter that this ordinance can be plopped down anywhere on campus. It is limited to an area to be designated and approved by the township. In this particular site, as I mentioned, it's a total macadam parking lot that we're talking about. It's interesting because it's really an island of institution surrounded by other institutional uses. It's along Lancaster Avenue across the street from other land owned by Villanova on the north. On the west, it is also adjacent to land owned by Villanova and used for institutional purposes. On the east, Villanova has what is called Pike Field. That is green open space in this area. There'll also be discussion you'll see later on when it's presented by the architect as to how many feet we are from the neighbors. And then on the south, we're also directly across from Villanova University. In fact, we're bisected by other institutional land owned by SEPTA, the Route 100 trolley line. And then across from that, you have Villanova South Campus, as well as what is known as the Alwyn Triangle, which is also open area owned by Villanova University. So in effect here, this is not something on the edge of campus. It is an island surrounded by other institutional uses, which makes it perfect for the type of development that we're intending here, because it is pulled as far away as possibly can be from the residential areas, which we know this board has typically asked us to avoid, not to build close to residential areas, and that's what this site, in fact, enhances, and that's why this site itself is unique. There also was discussion last time about why a zoning amendment as opposed to proceeding in this way with an amendment to the zoning ordinance. As you may be aware, what happens on a zoning amendment is you have a plan. About a month before the hearing before the zoning hearing board, you submit that plan. The zoning hearing board then has a hearing the following month on the particular plan that you've submitted. There is no give and take with the township. There is really very little give and take with the neighbors. It's the plan itself that would be subject to approval by variance, special exception, whatever relief is necessary. In this instance, what we've done is back in May, we submitted a request for a zoning amendment. That's May of 2012, so now we're 8-9 months later. And during that period of time, even before May, we had several meetings with the neighbors and with the Board of Commissioners. Since that time, we've had additional meetings with the neighbors and the Board of Commissioners. There was a lot of give and take here, and the plan has, in fact, been modified since that initial submission in May of 2012. Some of the modification, which would not have taken place if this was going before the Zoning Hearing Board for a zoning amendment. Some of those changes have been installation of pedestrian bridge, which was not on the original plan, the parking structure across the street from Jake Nevin Fieldhouse on that Pike parking lot. Initially, it was proposed to be 57 feet high. It has now been reduced to 38 feet, and the 38 feet complying with the current ordinance. Also, it was mentioned to us to alleviate some of the parking and traffic on Ithan Avenue. We have, in fact, done that by lowering that parking structure and dispersing the traffic along West Lancaster Avenue, as well as further down North Ithan on existing parking structures. There also, at the time, the ordinance did not provide for any setbacks along Lancaster Avenue, which the ordinance now provides. Provided for no setbacks along Ithan Avenue, which the ordinance now provides. Increased setbacks along the Route 100 trolley line. Reduced the height of the residences from 65 feet to 55 feet, according to the ordinances, and added that the average buildings for the dormitories can be no higher than 45 feet, and for all buildings, 50 feet. The difference with the 50-foot is because of the Performing Arts Center directly across the street from Nevin. Finally, there was discussion on what happens. How do we know you're going to build this plan, if we approve the zoning ordinance? But this is what's before you now, is to make recommendations on the zoning ordinance. One, the ordinance itself limits development on the site by the setbacks and by all the restrictions in the ordinance. Two, we're willing to, whatever the township recommends for us to do within reason, to bind us into this plan for this zoning ordinance, we're willing to consider. So that's just a brief overview of what the ordinance is about and what the project is about. We'll present additional testimony here this evening regarding the plan. Next, we have John Kluver from Voith and McTavish Architects are going to come up and discuss some of the elements of the plan.
Thank you, Nick, and good evening. Just want to start with a reminder of what is on the site currently. We have this very large surface parking lot that we are all extremely familiar with, and in its place, proposing an extension of the Villanova campus in a location that's very much central to the campus, an extension of the South Campus, tying it back into the main part of the campus. I also want to say, along with the renderings that are here, which are also on the website that Villanova has, we are showing a model out in the lobby here that has been updated based on the current design discussions. This model was originally shown over a year ago, and since that time it's been updated based on the comments that we have received. Some of the changes have included the addition of the bridge in front of the church. It includes the lowering of the proposed parking structure from 6 parking levels to 4. It includes the changes to the surface parking that were in front of the development. And it also, we went back and revisited all the neighborhood houses that show on the model, because there were concerns about the height and scale that were shown on them, and we went back and verified them as best we could, and made the modifications that would be appropriate for that. So we hope that that model is seen as a useful tool for understanding the true impact of this project on the area. Architecturally, this project is very much intended to be within the collegiate Gothic style of Villanova. Stone veneer, shingle roof, varied massing and heights and other items that add some visual interest, use of dormers, very much in keeping with the style on the campus. You can see here an image looking west along Lancaster Avenue with the church in the background. The Performing Arts Center in the very near ground, and then the corner of the Performing Arts Center, of the housing project at Lancaster Avenue and Ithan Avenue. Again, we really emphasize that we're trying to make this a quality construction in keeping with the character of Villanova University. The project is, as you can see here, also not directly on the street. It is set back. It varies anywhere from 30 feet along Lancaster to 80 feet along Lancaster Avenue, pulling back at this corner here of Ithan Avenue, and really maintaining a sense of openness, as you can see in this perspective. This is another view along Lancaster Avenue looking towards the complex. And what's worth noting here is the variation in the heights and the massing again. You can see the use of dormers. We're dealing with buildings that range anywhere from 2 stories to 5 stories. And on the taller buildings, the 4 stories and the 5 stories, they're in the roof line. So we're using dormers for the windows there so that you have the perception of it being not a 5-story, but a 4.5, or instead of a 4-story, a 3.5. You also have large courtyards along Lancaster Avenue. When you look at the plan again, you'll see 2 large courtyards there for active use, providing a visual breakup of the massing of the building, so that what is perceived along Lancaster Avenue is a series of smaller 140, 160-foot buildings instead of a 350-foot continuum of mass along this street. Those courtyards also provide green space for stormwater management, rain gardens, and other rain collection facilities as well. This is a very preliminary rendering of a bridge. It's more of a concept than a design at this stage. Villanova's getting started on an actual design for it, but again, the concept is a bridge that's within keeping with the character of Villanova University. Stone-clad, connecting directly across to the church, to the plaza there, so that from the church side you will be entering this bridge pretty much on grade, so you don't have that feeling of going up steps or up an elevator to get to it. So it's a natural flow, carrying all the way across our site, across the Route 100 tracks before going back down again at Aldwin Triangle. So again, it's something that we're really trying to connect the campus with this and not just provide a way to go across Lancaster Avenue, because it's been shown time and time again that bridges that are just bridges that you have to go up steps across and then back down again is not a path of desire and is less likely to be used. The question of building heights is a critical one. So this graphic shows the varied heights that we have on this project, and you'll see it ranges, as I mentioned before, from 2 stories to 5 stories, and the 5-story components are very carefully located to be perpendicular to Lancaster Avenue, away from property lines and other locations, so that again it's an internally facing portion of the project. The one corner, and actually I'll maybe save this for address again with the next or an upcoming slide, on the west end, which is the area closest to residential properties, is one of the lower buildings. It's about 35 feet and is under the height of the current zoning as permitted. Parking structure, again, 4 levels or 3 stories, which is under 38 feet as well. The Performing Arts Center is listed as 3 stories, but those are taller stories, as is appropriate for a building of that. So it's taller, more in the realm of a 4 to 5 story building, but at 3 stories. Distances to neighborhood properties, supporting Nick's comment about being surrounded by Villanova property and how it is very much central to their campus. You can see the parking structure is over 400 feet to the property line of the neighbors to the east, almost 700 feet to the property line of the neighbors along Ithan Avenue. The corner that's closest to neighborhood properties, which is the one by the SEPTA high-speed line station, you can see is still close to 250 feet to the properties. That first property, the 229, is actually a Villanova-owned property. So we also showed the 247 to the closest neighbor's property line as well, and over 350 feet to Aldwyn. And again, that corner that's closest to the SEPTA station and closest to the neighboring properties is a lower 3-story building. The legal setbacks are shown here, sort of the closest points from the right-of-way lines. It's worth noting that these are measured from the right-of-way lines, as is required by code. Curb lines actually tend to be a little further away, so that 31 feet setback that you see along Lancaster Avenue, there to the curb line, I don't have the exact number, may be more like 38 feet or something like that. So again, where we are closer to right-of-way lines, those are in areas that are, like for instance, along the SEPTA tracks. And it's worth reemphasizing that this project will have greatly improved stormwater management. On this parcel, we're decreasing the impervious coverage on the site, and not just decreasing the amount of impervious coverage, but improving the management of it. You see the indication of detention basins, or not basins, but underground systems that are being proposed. Several years ago when Villanova built the softball field, they added some capability, some capacity, 140,000 gallons. We're proposing about roughly a tripling of that capacity, or an additional capacity, so that the handling of the stormwater will be greatly improved from the existing condition. And this is an improvement that really is only permitted by a development of this scale. We'll next go on to traffic, being presented by Frank Tavani.
Thank you. As you can see on the screen, the traffic does have a history with this project as well. We've been collaborating with the Township and with the Township's consultant, Gilmore, since March of 2012. And under the Township's direction, Gilmore has provided a lot of guidance about how to focus the traffic study on the important issues that affect the community and the Township overall. One of the things that I've been saying since the beginning is that this project will, in fact, reduce peak hour traffic. And although we still believe that, we have agreed to actually add traffic as new trips to be generated by the project in the study area. Initially, when this project was first contemplated and the potential impacts of the zoning were thought about internally, there was an initial preliminary study that was done more for Villanova's internal due diligence. That study included 3 intersections. It included Lancaster and Ithan, as you might imagine, Ithan and Aldwyn, and then the combined access of SEPTA and the Villanova parking lot at Church Walk. In addition to those 3 intersections, there were also 4 driveways, namely the remaining unsignalized driveways that serve the 2 parking lots on Ithan and Lancaster, for a total of 7 locations. Since that study was done and since it was discussed initially over a year ago with the Township, we were requested to expand the scope significantly to include 17 total intersections. It's actually 14 locations, but some of the intersections are halves. County Line Ithan has a dog leg that goes underneath the railroad, so that's really 2 locations. 17 total, plus the driveways, so we're now up to almost 24 study locations. We were also asked to look at not only normal traffic, but also special event traffic. So in October of last year, we conducted counts during the homecoming football game. We also conducted our routine traffic in November. We had a scheduling issue, had to actually do the homecoming event first, and then the regular counts afterwards. And then out of concern that possibly homecoming may have been lightly attended for whatever reason, we were asked to look at a basketball game as well, which we did in December. All this information took some time to compile, was done in mid to late December and submitted as a deliverable, as I was calling it, to the Township in January. And I stayed away from the term submittal because Gilmore suggested that as a courtesy to the applicant, we can work together to look at things in steps rather than submit everything all at once. So they're really not really submittals as much as they're deliverables. We received feedback on February 1st, which I think was the Friday before the last PC meeting. Largely, they were very technical comments, which we have no problem incorporating in their entirety. The next deliverable was submitted just about 9 days ago, and that dealt largely with trip generation, parking, trip distribution. We haven't had comments back yet, but it's only been a few days. We anticipate another deliverable probably later this month or in April that will cover most of the future conditions. And it was also suggested, and we embraced, involving PennDOT in this whole process and getting some of their feedback as well. So although it's a little bit out of the norm, they did agree to look at things in this piecemeal fashion, and we're still waiting for comments from them, but we anticipate they'll be received shortly.
Good evening. I'm Bob Morrow, Head of Facilities at Villanova. The last chart shows, we were asked last time we were in front of the Planning Commission, what is the kind of buildable area or the by right parcel. So we show this in two areas. To the left, kind of this anvil shaped, if we respect all the current setbacks, that's a buildable area. And then over on the Pike lot, the darker, is where we could build a building, and the gray, lighter gray area is where we could put surface parking. So that was a response to questions from last time. We did do a quick study to see what we could fit there. We can fit approximately 200 beds of dormitories, and we'd need about 450 parking spaces that we could put in a 4-level parking structure on the anvil shape if we were trying to do something by right on these parcels. But clearly it's an inefficient use of the land, which is why we're in front of you tonight with our request for the zoning amendment. Finally, we have several charts. These might be a little hard to read. They're summarized in your written read-ahead materials. The first one shows the difference between our initial submission for the zoning amendment and then our current submission. As Nick said at the beginning, we've made a few changes. Those are all illustrated there, I guess. The greatest being at the bottom and the height of the buildings.
Excuse me, Bob.
Sure.
When you refer to the initial submission, you don't mean the first submission to this board?
No, sorry, to the Board of Commissioners.
I just want to make that clear. We're not talking about what we saw last week. That was
Correct.
the same. Go ahead.
So everything that you saw last week is under current submission. So as you can see, some changes to the setbacks and the heights, notably from the residence halls from 65 to 55 feet, parking structure from 65 to 38 feet, and from 6 levels to 4 levels, and then the Performing Arts Center from 65 to 60. The next 3 charts are kind of busy. I'm not going to go through them in detail. I'll be happy to answer any questions. But again, we show what the existing PI ordinance allows, what we're requesting under the CICD, what's shown on our drawings, and in a few instances, some distance from curbs. So we were asked for a summary of what is different or what the differences are between the current PI zoning ordinance and our requested zoning amendment. So these 3 slides summarize those requested changes.
I have a general question about this chart. When I was looking at
Sure.
this, I noticed that as written in the CICD requirements, some of the setbacks are very small, but you're not using those. It looked like in the sketch plan that we had before us, some of those setbacks are actually similar to existing, so why did you make them so small if you don't need to use them? Because it's concerning, and yet it wasn't necessary.
In some cases, for example, the setbacks apply to maybe one building but not the other. We're trying to be general with those, not have too many lines of detail. And the second is it's still a concept plan, it's still a sketch plan. So as we go through the detailed design, it may change a little bit. We haven't gone really in the design process. We haven't gone past what you've seen last week or last month and this month.
Yeah, and Susan, on the one. Oh, Julia, I'm sorry.
That's fine.
Julia, on the one, too, that's noticeable there, and that's my fault. In the parking garage, it says 5 feet, and in fact, it's 179 feet from...
And the surface parking says 0, and it's 203.
No, the second one I meant, the parking garage, where
Okay.
it says 5 and 179. That's just my error on the drafting of the ordinance. I should have covered that in the ordinance.
Because one of our concerns with looking at this ordinance at the same time considering your design plan, which is not how we normally do things, is that we want to make sure that we're not passing an ordinance that would give us something different than what we're expecting. And this is concerning because, for instance, if this says there's 0 requirement for a setback for surface parking, but your plan has 203 feet, that seems odd.
We have no problem with correcting that. That was really a drafting error.
I think that's something
on
we're
our
going to
spot.
need to see.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That was just a drafting error on our spot. When you go through it and actually went through this chart, the comment was, oh, my God, we didn't realize that we had proposed, a 5-foot parking garage and it's 179 feet, or that the surface parking is 203 feet. Because right now it's 0 feet, as you know.
What we
on
want to
that
focus
lot.
in on is the difference between the existing and your sketch plan.
Right.
But we don't want to get thrown off by these numbers. We don't want them to be different, really, than the sketch plan, ultimately, as you get through this process.
We understand.
Did you have more?
I have 2 other slides, but I
ahead.
was just going to show them quickly. This gets into the heights, the building length and spacing. And just a note on the building frontage on Lancaster, here it says 86.9. We assume that the full face of the building was counted in this dimension, but because there are courtyards there, the other buildings are set back quite a bit from the street, and it's not, doesn't appear to be 86% of the frontage to be built upon. And then finally, the parking and the buffer areas. So I didn't want to bore you by going through line by line, but if there's questions, I'm happy to discuss them.
I have a question, Nick, to your initial remarks that you made. One of our concerns, I remember from last month, one thing we were concerned about was, again, because we're looking at an ordinance change rather than a plan,
Right.
we don't want the changes that you are proposing here to affect other areas of the township.
Right.
And you touched on that in your initial remarks, but I think you need to talk about that some more because I know that's going to come up.
Okay. 2 things. One, as I mentioned to the board previously, the way the ordinance is drafted, the applicant would designate an area, and then the township would approve that area by conditional use. Secondly, if you look at the ordinance, many of the of reducing setbacks is tied into an institution owning both sides of the street, an institution being on an arterial. And in that matter, the question is, where else would be applicable in the township? And it would only be applicable in areas where the same institution owns both sides of the street, not separate institutions. And also, we're dealing with an arterial. And so that, to some extent, limits what is happening here. And the reason for that is, I said, when you own both sides of the street, I know we talked about this to some extent in the institutional review ordinance, that should some leeway be given to an institution who owns on both sides of the street. And so the ordinance was drafted with that in mind.
Can I ask a quick question? Does that mean that, for all intents and purposes, the north side of campus on the other side of Lancaster would be a CICD type district?
Well, we would have to designate it as that type of district. Certainly, we have no intent on doing that. And again, if there's a recommendation in the ordinance that perhaps on one side of an arterial you're allowed to have these liberalization of the setbacks, whereas on the other side of an arterial you would not be permitted to have it. So speaking of the ordinance that we could do, we can provide for that.
But absent that provision, the north side looks like it's on all fours, just like the south side.
I'd have to look at it a little bit closer, Skip, but off the top of my head, I would guess you're probably right. You're probably accurate. But again, we have not really had any feedback from township staff yet either on the ordinance. I'm sure they're going to have some comments for us on the ordinance itself also before it even gets to a point where it's going to be submitted for a public hearing by the Board of Commissioners. I anticipate what will happen here is at some point the ordinance will be modified, some of the corrections we talked about would be made, and hopefully the Board of Commissioners would then schedule it for a public hearing, which would then kick it back to you and to Implementation Committee and to everyone else for comments before the public hearing would take place. And I'll look over to my right side here to see if that's somewhat accurate or not.
That would be the projected timeline as to how things would flow from that standpoint.
Why don't we continue to take questions from the board for the applicant, and then we'll talk to staff and get public comments. So jump in. I'm sorry, are you done with your presentation? Yes, ma'am. Go ahead.
So a couple of kind of housekeeping items that I saw when I looked through this. I don't actually see this provision that Nick's mentioned a couple of times about the conditional use requirement for the designation of a CICD. Would that be, I don't see it within the proposed zoning amendment, and so I'm wondering, Nick, where your reference?
68.1 D1.
B what?
68.1 D as in David, subsection 1, use regulations.
As a condition, great, okay, thank you. And then the other thing about it is that it specifically references that the lot area, the aggregate lot area has to be greater than 10 and no more than 25 acres. But the area that you're proposing, there's a public street in the middle of it, so I don't understand how that's one contiguous lot.
But now, because we own both sides of the street.
Yeah, but you don't own the street.
We
so
do own the street.
You
There's a
own
right-of-way.
on both sides
Yeah.
to the center line.
Yeah,
So that's how you
and
can
throughout
combine
Radnor
it.
Township, you own the center of your street, too. And what is, there's a right-of-way that goes
So that's not considered two separate lots that are being combined together, Peter? I mean,
It depends on how the ordinance.
can you put your mic on?
I'm sorry, I thought I had turned it on. I believe our ordinance is written that it is treated as one lot. There's been a discussion, I believe, at the last meeting, or maybe actually a discussion when we were dealing with the PI changes about treating, the Villanova campus and other college campuses in the township either as one entire lot or dividing them up into multiple lots. And I believe at the end of that discussion last month, it was the Planning Commission wanted to treat them as one single lot and not as multiple lots divided by streets.
So then what keeps the north side of Lancaster Avenue from being part of this lot as well, which would put it over the 25 acres? It seems like,
But we're designating an area that has to be approved by the township as to the area that we're designating.
I understand that,
But
but
I'm saying, and that's why what we talked about with Skip is perhaps the
Nick,
ordinance
this
should
was a
be-
question for Peter,
I'm sorry.
actually.
Go ahead.
what keeps the north side of Lancaster Avenue from, on that same logic, from being part of this one lot theory that then puts it over the 25 acres for the limit that they spelled out in their PI in the amendment?
I believe how what Nick has said and what the amendment reads is that they would propose an area that this would apply to. That area would have to be 25 acres or less, and then that proposal would be made to the Board of Commissioners, and the Board of Commissioners would then say yay or nay on that proposal. Once an area was designated within the Villanova campus, it couldn't be moved, or if an area was chosen and then developed, at that point they're locked in and they can't expand it or move it. But as this moves forward, I don't know from my personal standpoint if I like that setup. I think there's other ways in which to better lock this in. But it certainly either that way would work or another way would work to ensure that what your concern is, Susan, would not happen.
Okay, so then, thank you, I appreciate that.
But then should it be called lot area?
Pardon?
Would it help if we had a different term, instead of calling it a lot acre greater than 10 acres and not more than 25 acres? If we had another term for the
Yes.
area being designated
Yes.
for the new...
It definitely. I mean, that's one of the problems I have, especially if we're going to adopt a new PI ordinance that's going to look at the campus as a whole, as a single lot. We're going to need to, have a term for this
All right, well,
special
the
sub
term
area
is
of
a
the
minor
campus.
point, but let's keep that in mind going forward.
So then I took, actually, the question I asked Nick last month about, are there other parts of the township where this could potentially happen? And, Nick mentioned about the arterial streets, but what I'm reading about the setbacks is that the arterial street owned by both sides, on both sides by the same institution, would have a 15-foot setback, but just regular old streets, i.e. Ithan, could have as small as I think Ithan's not an arterial. It would only have a 10-foot setback. So it wasn't clear to me. And then if it's just on any public street where both sides of the property are owned by the same institution, if it's a parking structure, it can be as close as 5 feet. So the reason I was looking at all that closely is that then I went to the zoning maps that we have in the township to see, are there other areas where this type of development could take place? And, as our township is currently configured, there are very few instances where this could occur. However, if, I'm trying to place what building this is. If Cabrini and Eastern College were ever to sell property or merge, or if Valley Forge and Eastern were to be involved in a sale, then right up on Eagle Road, we'd have a same type of, that land would be eligible for this CI/CD development as well, because both sides of the street would be owned on Eagle Road. In addition, and I can't think of what the property is across the street, where's Ashwood? Remind me where Ashwood is.
Up by West Campus, Villanova.
Oh, then that's the west part of that. On Roberts Road, interestingly, the back part of Sacred Heart, which is on Bryn Mawr Avenue, that PI land extends all the way up to Roberts Road. There's actually a chunk of land on Roberts Road that is owned and zoned PI, and it's owned by, I think it looks like Sacred Heart to me from the map.
I think it may be the Clark School for the Deaf, maybe?
Could be, but it's PI. And across the street from that is another PI institution. And then there's a lot more, there's actually several more areas within Villanova's campus that could potentially be designated the same way. On 320 up over the bridge on both sides of the road. That's not to say that Villanova or any of these institutions would sell land and go for this, and so I'm glad to see the specificity of a conditional use. But it is to say that when we're talking about setbacks, and if both sides of the street are owned by the same institution, that's what had me looking throughout the township. What streets in our township have PI on both sides of the street, and are there areas where we are potentially vulnerable? Because what everybody has talked about, the applicants, us, the public has all talked about Villanova's plan, Villanova's plan, Villanova's plan, but the fact is this is an overlay and a new use that could be used by other institutions. So, we should keep some of these setbacks in mind with some of those other roads as well.
And Susan, as you're aware, and you mentioned, the township would have a say on whether this would be applicable through the conditional use process.
I have a question for Peter.
Yes.
When an ordinance like this or an overlay like this is created, and there are other situations, as Susan was saying, in the township that are 70, 80, 90% of the way to being able to have the same kind of a overlay district, does the township have any legal vulnerability in terms of a lawsuit to compel us to open this type of zoning up, since we've granted it and they have 80 or 90% of the same criteria already met?
No. What the township needs to be concerned with in this sort of situation, there are two things that would concern me. One is contract zoning, where we agree to change the zoning based on them giving us something, like a contract. You give me this, and we'll give you that. And then spot zoning. And so, if we can avoid both of those items, just because there's another college campus, and I think, one of the things Susan brought up, those concerns, the roads she mentioned that have PI on both sides, none of them are arterial roads, I don't believe. Only Lancaster and, what's it, 322?
But that only means the setbacks can be even closer to the road.
322. But if this sort of use has to front an arterial road, then that's a limitation. Just because no other campuses in the township front such a road doesn't make us vulnerable. And just because they can meet 80 or 90% of the requirements doesn't mean we have to go the extra 10 or 20%. What they can do, obviously, is seek a variance.
But they're relaxing or proposing to relax the setback requirements on Ithan merely because a lot of the lot fronts on Lancaster, right?
I don't know the reasons, but yes, they are proposing to reduce the setbacks on Ithan, yes.
Peter, but the way this is currently written, it's not specifically stipulated that this is for a lot that has an arterial frontage. The arterial references that I see, maybe point them out to me, really just have to do with the variety of setbacks. To me, it didn't have anything to do with it doesn't say anything in designation about there needing to be an arterial road. So that would be something that if we were even going to consider that, that would be one safeguard we'd want to
Yes,
put in.
yes, definitely.
Okay, and then separate from that is to make sure that, well, first of all, I don't know, is Eagle Road an arterial road?
No, it's not.
Okay. So then, but is King of Prussia? Can they use
No.
a front? King of Prussia Road's not an arterial?
No.
I think Peter said 320 might be, though.
It's Lancaster, North Spring Mill, and Sproul are the three. That's
In
all.
the entire township?
Yes. It's the township that makes these designations.
Okay, all righty. So, all right, that's good to know. So that, you know, those are just the types of things that, you know, we want to think about, making sure that it's not applicable necessarily in some of these smaller roads.
And just in this general regard, I think if...
Because are we missing it? Where does it actually say that in the ordinance?
It doesn't say that.
It
That's
says
my point.
But
it's
it
in the
seems-
saldo, section 27.
No.
No. Where does it say in the ordinance that this CDIC needs to
It might not, but I think Nick, in his presentations, has kind of made the indication that he's limiting
That's
it
the plan.
to...
Okay.
Yes, and that's what I want to point out to the Planning Commission. When you find these omissions or these holes in the ordinance, if you do decide that you want to move forward with this, we need to keep a list of holes and add them. When we find, if the township decides to move forward on this, this is not a situation where we have to accept this ordinance lock, stock, and barrel. We can make as many or as few changes to it as we wish when it moves forward. And the Board of Commissioners can also make those changes. So if there are problems with the ordinance, if you think there's holes in the ordinance, if you think there's things that need to be tightened up, keep a list of them, and that can be part of your recommendation.
This feels like a moment that I wanted to bring one more thing up. We've had some email discussion back and forth today about the fact that this hasn't gone to Delaware County so far, to the Planning Commission,
Nope.
and that staff thought that perhaps it would go after we made our recommendation, but we had an informal, momentary conversation before the start of the meeting. Why don't we have it now, so that if they've looked at 5 other PI districts or something like this, that we could have that input now while we're working to make a recommendation, while we're working to find the holes and the issues that are in this overlay, that we should have the benefit of another set of eyes and minds on this.
Well, if that's something the Planning Commission wants, the township certainly can't forward it to the County Planning Commission.
I mean, we changed the athletic field height, and we had something from Delaware County. Why can't we have it on Villanova?
And we had outdoor dining went to, while we were in the discussion of most of our ordinances, we have comments from Delaware County in the midst of our discussion.
Well, under the MPC, any land use ordinance, saldo zoning, must go to the County Planning Commission by law. And you must give them a 30-day opportunity to review and comment on it before it can be enacted. Now, the problem is that they have to see the final version that's enacted ultimately by the township. If the township makes any changes, even very minor changes, the courts have said it's got to go back. So, but that's why every ordinance you review most likely is going to be in front of the county at one point or another. Sometimes it might not be until after you review it, but many times, especially like outdoor dining, which has been back and forth, they're going to see it and you're going to get comments. That being said, there's no reason why, from a legal standpoint, you don't send it now if that's what you want to do.
I mean, this is so important and such a huge project. If it went there twice, would that be so bad?
No.
No.
The other thing is, normally if someone comes to us with a development plan, we all look at it, we have our own ideas, we talk to the applicant, but we also get staff comments. So what's the appropriate place for us to get our township staff comments on this ordinance?
Well, similar to the county review, since this was the first time that this petition had been in front of you, we wanted to have the Planning Commission members vet this out, get your recommendations to the commissioners, who will then also be making changes to it prior to then spending a lot of time going over and giving comments on something that may change. So as this is going to go through multiple rounds of revisions, have the first revision get through Planning Commission, get up to the commissioners, and then as it's sent back, then that's when it would go to the county staff would be offering, as well as to the Comprehensive Plan Implementation Committee for their review.
Because, we talk about things like, catching a hole that's probably unintentional, but, might be there. We may not see that. Hopefully Peter's going to see it. But we need to know that stuff before we get too far along, I would think. So that would be after the commissioners, or what are you saying?
My intent was after that you made your initial recommendation on this petition, that once the commissioners then looked at it and decided that they were going to accept some or make some additional changes, that is then when we would send it out, since the meat of the ordinance has been discussed and changes have been done to that, then send it to the various boards and committees at that point in time.
Yeah.
Speaking for myself, and I hope for other members of the board, I think it should go in some way now, even in a rough, unfinished version, because we would have input now from Delaware County. I really don't want to make a recommendation almost without hearing from the county, because it's this $200 million project. This is a long process, and advice now would be appreciated here.
I do want to ask a question about the arterial streets again. How frequently is that updated? I was just looking at the ATA and when are streets reclassified. I'm shocked to read the definition of arterial and that King of Prussia Road doesn't qualify as an arterial at this. So, Amy, since you're here, how often does that happen, or is it just doesn't happen?
I'm not sure when the last time I'm not sure when the last time that SALDO was updated or reviewed. Somebody from the township might be able to help out with that.
I just meant, so that would have to be specifically changed in SALDO because
Typically.
it's both, because it's listed as ATA, the definition of an arterial street is both, from an ATA standpoint, more than 10,000 cars a day. I had read it. And then it went on to name the arterial streets we currently have. That, to me, doesn't say that that couldn't be kind of a changing thing based on the traffic.
Typically, when 1990, they're checking right now, but it appears that maybe in 1990 it was revised. If that's something, I don't think that they look at those periodically to review them. I'm not sure.
It says on the front of it says on the history that it was adopted by Radnor Ordinance 613, 1983.
Someone commented, the comp plan back in 2003 also had it. Cheryl, thank you. The comp plan from 2003 also lists the arterials, and they list those three.
I have a question about the traffic plan. The applicant mentioned the several levels they've been through and the work they've started doing on the traffic studies. I think we're back in that position where we're being asked to consider something before we get the traffic studies. When will we have them?
They're working through the process, and I don't think it's unusual to go through the zoning without the traffic information, because those things will be addressed regardless of what decisions are made on the zoning. So I don't think it's unusual to have it done in that sequence. So the information that we have right now is very preliminary. It's mostly existing conditions, but we are starting to work through the process into the future, as Frank mentioned.
We did Cabrini, and we had traffic studies from the same gentleman, too. And we actually got to see them.
Correct.
While we were looking at everything.
Right, and I don't believe, was there a zoning change?
Land development.
That was just through the land development process, and that's what I'm
This
trying to
could have
point
been
out.
that, but
is-
we're doing the overlay instead, that's all.
Well, there's sort of a catch-22, because if we're doing this zoning change, and let's say we liked this zoning change and we recommended it for approval, they would then be able to do this plan. It would be almost a by right plan at that point, and then what difference would it make what the traffic plan said?
Well,
Remember,
if you,
still got to go through still got to go through the conditional use process.
Right.
It's not just by approving the amendment doesn't mean that we have a by right plan. The township still has to approve everything as well. Yeah.
Can I comment, though? You gave it to staff on the 21st, right? The second one, right, Frank?
Again, the study is so large that we decided to break it up in pieces. The first piece was existing conditions. It was just getting feedback on whether or not how we collected all the data at all the locations was appropriate. And then the next step was looking at how we're going to come up with a trip generation rate for this project overall. There were also requests to look into parking, look into accident history, look into a lot of things. So the second deliverable was submitted on February 21st, and that's the trip generation component.
But you're hoping for feedback from staff.
Yes, again, because if a traffic study is submitted all at once, what can happen, and what Gilmore was trying to caution me against, was if there's some fundamental disagreement and you have to start all over again, then that would only just delay the process for everybody. So it would be more helpful now to get some feedback along the way to make sure we're going down the right path, and then work on the final piece, which will be just the amalgamation of all these deliverables into one study. And as added protection to the township, PennDOT is also now engendered in the whole process and is also providing feedback.
Could we at least have a listing of the intersections that you're reviewing?
I don't know if you would like staff to provide that or me.
Anybody, I don't care who.
How many pages? so
We
to
feel
speak?
like we're working in the dark here.
Yeah. How many
Well,
pages is the 21st report?
I'm sorry?
How many pages?
It's about 210.
Okay. Is there a summary, couple pages?
I would be happy to provide whatever.
But I mean, did you include a summary with the 210 pages? Like,
The 210 pages is a misleading number. That's mostly backup and technical
Right.
information. I mean, the text itself is probably on the order of 15 pages of figures, things of that sort.
I mean, on the township website is the questions from the neighbors, the 140 questions. I mean, we could look at the parking thing. We may be able to give you our feedback as well as the feedback from staff. That's all.
Can I go back, take a step back of like kind of a more, just a little bit more basic premise? If the purpose and intent of this CICD is to promote a pedestrian-friendly landscape, why is it that they're going for more density and want increases in impervious coverage? Those, I mean, I thought the notion of what they were trying to achieve was more green space, a green space feeling campus, bringing everybody together, you know, but this area will be more impervious, so that doesn't, what are you shaking your head about?
Not going to be more impervious. It'll be, overall, it'll be less impervious, but
They're asking to, well, hang on. Again, I'm not talking about Villanova's specific plan. I'm talking about
Okay.
zoning.
all right.
Because I'm going to be the one to say, I'm not all that bothered by the parking lot. Now, here's the reason I'm not bothered by the parking lot. Because I like the open space look as I drive along. I get that there's a parking lot and that impervious is a bad thing in this particular location. But from a visual standpoint, when I drive down Lancaster and I drive down South Ithan, the openness is a positive to me. But separate from Villanova's plan, because this is about a zoning amendment, if it's meant to, what I'm looking for in the zoning amendment, if it's meant to be about a pedestrian-friendly environment that takes advantage of the landscape, and yet the impervious coverages are higher, those seem to fly in the face of one another, and the types of things that they are specifically outlining would be in this CICD thing, community, would be the restaurants and personal shops and banks and theaters and things that would bring traffic to it. And what I don't see in the ordinance are either requirements or, requirements or ideas or something to offset an increase in traffic and volume, which is the reason I think everybody keeps asking about the traffic studies, is that our sense is that while you have the intention to bring the kids on campus and you have the intention of trying to create a really neat community for the kids, which I can't dispute, the concern from our perspective is that it will increase volumes of traffic, and that's why everybody's asking for the traffic study. And so what I'm looking for in the ordinance is what would you do to mitigate the inevitable increases in traffic?
Okay, Susan, if I may address a couple comments. One, recall, and you can see up on this plan here, and I'm referring to it, right now the sidewalk is right on Lancaster Avenue on both sides of the street. We are now pulling the sidewalk back, planting trees, as well as putting a pedestrian crossing over at Church Walk in front of the chapel. Secondly, is going to be part of the conditional use process that Villanova will have to come forward with traffic mitigation issues. Also, I will point out, and we don't have the traffic study here in front of us, but right now you have 1,000-some commuters who aren't living on campus who are driving to campus in the morning. They're already going to be there. They're not going to be driving to campus in the morning. Now, again, I'm not a traffic engineer. I'm not going to profess I have the traffic concept here, but it certainly makes sense that traffic is going to be less, at least, and at peak hours as a result of the students already being on campus as opposed to having to commute to campus.
But you're still going to have your evening commuters and graduate students and so forth.
It'll be the same as you always have.
But
I
with
have
the
to-
large performing arts center,
Oh, it's 400 seats. How many? 400 seats? 350?
I have to agree about the traffic studies, though, because using Ithan Avenue as my daily route, I do see and notice the difference in how many cars are coming and going based on the event. I realize how whenever there's an event, there are signs up coming into our streets that ask people not to park there, and I notice the congestion in my neighborhood or just trying to get out. There's times where I can't get down Ithan Avenue as it is and have to take other routes. I'm talking the traffic backed up from the light all the way back to Meadowwood. So there's days that I go to the stop sign, see the cars waiting, and turn left. So how is it going to make this worse, or is it going to make this better? Because if you're trying to pull the students on campus, yet you have all these intersections coming onto Ithan Avenue. How are we as homeowners going to get out of there when we need to an arterial street where we need to be able to get out quick? How are we going to get out there?
As Nick just pointed out, it's our position that this would actually benefit you and other residents by reducing or eliminating the commuting traffic that occurs today with these 1,159 students who arrive in the morning and leave in the afternoon. It's during those times when traffic is worse and what's most difficult for people to get in and out of their driveways or get through intersections. And it's not just localized at these individual locations. It's throughout the entire township. If a student's commuting from the other side of town or somewhere along the Blue Route, that traffic is impacting many intersections on its way to Villanova. So by bringing that traffic out of that whole system and onto campus, so now they're just having their car be in reserve in the parking garage and walking to campus, we believe there's actually going to be a reduction in.
So you're saying Villanova is going to put something into the student population or to the parents or that the students have to live on campus?
No, not exactly. But the purpose of this project is to address an unmet demand for full-time undergraduate students who are currently, for all intents and purposes, being pushed off campus because there's not available housing. And yet there is an interest and demand in living on campus, which is why there's this whole reason that we're here tonight.
So how are you going to prove then that if you can't make the students stay on campus, that they're going to want to live there? I mean, not to stray too far from the zoning, but how do you guarantee that the traffic's going to lessen, that the students are going to want to live there when living off campus as a junior and senior is a pretty cool thing to do?
Chris Kowalski with Villanova University. I can speak more toward the thought process about this and how we are very confident that we know students will want to live there. We have built two similar housing districts on campus over the last 30 years, one on South Campus near your neighborhood and one on West Campus, and they're roughly the same size or similar size to what we're proposing here. And in both cases, they were full very quickly upon being built. We know, especially with West Campus, where it's predominantly juniors and seniors, the same sort of students that we'd be serving here, that demand exceeds supply. Every year that there are more students who want to live there than we're able to accommodate. There's a lottery process, and those who can't live on campus are turned away to find spaces off campus. We know then, based upon the student demand and what we hear from parents and prospective parents, that students will want to live here, that parents will want their students to live here. We'll be providing a 9-month residential opportunity in a furnished new apartment that's adjacent to where they'll be studying and going to class, socializing, versus 12-month out in the community with landlords, leases they have to furnish farther away from campus where transportation becomes an issue in conditions that often are very unseemly. So we know that we'll be providing a very favorable option for students and families.
So if the cars are kind of in reserve there, what's all the different exits onto the roads, and why you're proposing quite a few more exits than are currently allowed?
It's actually the same amount of entrances and exits into the.
Well, the CICD asks for no limit.
Well,
I guess.
I just put an image of our our proposal up here on the screen.
Okay.
And you can see that there's a driveway here and here, which currently exist. There's also a driveway here, which currently exists, and here, which currently exists. So we're not increasing any access points to this site.
But you're proposing through the CICD that be something that you can do.
If I could just point out that I haven't had a chance to sink my teeth into it and
Okay.
provide my thoughts on it, but that's clearly one of the things that I think needs to be eliminated is that I think that the 100-foot set, from intersection to intersection is important. There's a lot of
Right.
things that were in there that were eliminated that I don't agree with, but I haven't commented on that.
Okay,
And
great.
the other thing that I did want to say was that when the whole process started out, we had provided a scope of study to Villanova, and there were a lot of things that we asked them to address. So what I could do is prepare that information for you so you have a chance to review exactly what will be included in the study. So even though you may not have the complete study to look at, you'll know what information is being studied and what it is that we're anticipating receiving from them. One of the things you might be interested in is that during special events, we had requested that they prepare some kind of, along with the police department, put together some kind of a ingress-egress for the area. We asked for electronic signing boards. There were a lot of different things that we discussed in the meeting that we asked them to investigate and look into. So I want to assure you that, just because we don't have the traffic study doesn't mean that things aren't going to happen and that we don't have input into things that will occur.
I think what the biggest concern is, even though it's not Ithan's not an arterial, a lot of these roads, like Eagle Road, they are accesses to arterial roads. And if you can't get to the arterial road because of congestion and you don't have your sight lines and you don't have your ability to maneuver in that area properly, then what good is the arterial road to you?
Right.
So
And that's when you
my
get your
biggest
cut-through.
concern.
And that's when you get your cut-through traffic if you're not able to use those
Exactly, and
arterials.
that's
So-
when, so all of our residents, all of us, and in any of these neighborhoods by these colleges and universities or by the schools, have to take alternate routes that aren't necessarily the safest or the best, and those are the type of things we're concerned as residents, and not just at Villanova, but really for any of the expansions, like you mentioned, Eagle Road, Cabrini. That's it, thank you.
Just one comment. I had mentioned in the beginning that we had dispersed the parking. And in fact, and we don't have a plan in front of you here, but on, we call it the West Lancaster Avenue parking. There's going to be a new surface parking lot that takes away from this parking lot, since development is there on West Lancaster Avenue to the west of that SEPTA parking lot there. Also, we're adding additional levels both to the liberal arts parking lot, which is in the middle of campus, as well as the parking structure that is on, that's behind Bartley Hall on Ithan Avenue. So it is being dispersed and is not concentrated in this area, and actually be less parking in this area than what we currently have today.
So will those types of structures take some of the heavy crowds that come in for the special events, especially on weekends and evenings? So you're directing traffic away from Ithan?
As Amy mentioned, we have had a number of conversations with the township, and there are some measures that we've already started to work on implementing, and one of them is better management during peak events of where we park people and how we get them there. So as we're looking at, let me just go back to this site overview of campus so you can get a sense for what we're talking about. So as Nick mentioned, we are planning some surface level parking down here west on Lancaster Avenue from the proposed project site. And in addition, we're going to add a level to an existing parking structure right here and a level to an existing parking structure right here. With this parking here on campus particularly, we know that we can bring onto campus all faculty and staff that currently work on main campus. Right now, there are some faculty and staff who do park in main lot, contributing to the stress of that intersection that you're talking about on a daily basis. So we can take them away from that intersection and park them, and they'll be happier, they'll be parking closer to where they work. We can also make better use of these structures to assign parking for, say, our season ticket basketball holders. Perhaps the police have suggested bringing them into campus through alternate entrances or from other directions, assigning them parking perhaps on a rotating annual basis, making use of these two parking structures that I mentioned, behind the pavilion, and perhaps the law school parking garage. So these are already processes in place, that the conversations that have started as a result of this project, but that we're able to put into place now moving forward to help manage the impact that is already felt through peak events.
The parking that's on the surface lot now, the orange thing.
Yes.
Some of that is obviously commuters from Garrett Hill or wherever. Are you going to designate part of the lot only for residents of the new 1,100 and whatever beds?
Yes. In addition to what I just talked about for peak events, we also have a need to create a better system for where our students park. Right now, depending on what students, where they live and what hang tags they have, there is some flexibility for them perhaps to be on West Campus where they live and park in the main lots, and we're going to take that away. Where they live is where they're going to park, and they're not going to be able to use their car to commute back and forth to class. That's a system we're investigating right now. And for the surface level parking that we're proposing down here, roughly 250 additional spots. There's already 100 spots here to serve these houses, which will stay there to serve the staff that park there. Those spots will remain, and we'll add 250 spots. Those spots will serve those students who commute from Garrett Hill, Conshohocken, other places on a daily basis. They'll enter this lot. They can certainly get here off of Itham, but that won't be the path of least resistance. They'll be able to enter this lot if they're coming west on Lancaster, turning at the new intersection at the church and coming in this way into the lot. Or if they're coming from heading east, there'll be a right turn into this lot. So one of the other benefits and the other improvements that we think we can make as a result of this project is right now there's 6 or 7 or 8, I forget how many driveways along this stretch of Route 30. We can eliminate all but one of them, a right turn in and a right turn out, which will also improve the traffic flow. Right now, if you're heading west, you can get stuck behind people turning left. And certainly if you're heading east, you can get stuck behind people trying to turn into those sharp driveways. We think we can improve that with this as well.
Just in that scenario, with the right turn out, the people will all be going east on Lancaster?
They could still come back out. If they needed to go westbound on Lancaster, they would be able to come out at the church light.
Approximately how many students, I'm sorry, are you done? I'm sorry. How many students live off campus today?
Roughly 2,000.
And have you conducted a study amongst those students, not the parents, not people who might be parents in the future or might send their kids to Villanova at some point in the future, but amongst those kids who presently live off campus, have you conducted a study as to how they feel about moving on campus if housing was available?
Yeah, well, it's a mixed answer because you're asking them to consider a question that they can only answer one way right now.
Well, I guess my question is, did you conduct a study?
No, but they're not the target audience. The people who'd be living in these dorms are currently sophomores and juniors in high school. So those are the people who will be making college decisions over the next few years, who are going to be looking at institutions, and one of the factors they're going to be determining along with their families is how much residential housing is offered.
But you haven't made a study of people who may have wanted to live on campus, but as you just said a few minutes ago in your remarks, lost in the lottery or showed up too late or whatever, were not able to get on campus. You don't have any numbers for us as to how many of those people would have said, yes, I would have moved on to campus if there's another 1,100 spots available.
No, I don't have that. But what I did say before is that we know that we have X amount of spots and X plus, there's a surplus of people who want those spots.
How big of a surplus?
I don't have those numbers.
I think it would be a good idea to have some of those numbers because one of the reasons we're all here, and I think the reasons why you are here, is because you want to utilize this land in order to bring these students onto campus. Well, if you throw the party and nobody shows up or very few people show up, it's not going to go well.
Well, again, I have a couple of answers to that. One is that, like I said, we've done this twice before over the past 30 years. We've had a party, and more than people than we've invited have shown up. We've had to turn away some people at the door. So we're confident that the demand is there. Second of all, these students come to Villanova knowing that they don't have a place to live on campus, and so they're automatically looking to live off campus. It's sort of a loaded question to ask them if they would because their mindset's not there. And third, we are appealing to an increasingly competitive group of students who are making their college choices, picking against peer institutions that can offer amenities like this. We have a very fine academic program, but often we come up short with better students because they're able to go to other schools that offer more amenities like more residential housing. They're picking with other things as well. So, I can look into what numbers we have to offer, but I just want to reset sort of the question that we're asking, in that it's not necessarily about what the current students would want, because they don't have that option right now. It's about what the students behind them are looking for.
I think, to my way of thinking, it would be good to ask the question, because those are the students who are probably similar to the students you might have in the future. And do you have a plan that if you open up the 1,100 spaces and only 500 of them fill up, are you going to bring in more students, or a bit more students, to Villanova to fill up those empty places?
We're not bringing in more students. We're confident, again, that we'll fill these with current undergraduates, and if not, we offer no housing for our graduate students or our law students. And if the need arises, which again we don't envision, we would move to them to fill the space.
Okay, can we go to get some public comment now, and then we'll come back? Sure.
I have another question, and I saw this when I was looking at these plans, and maybe it's been troubling me, so I want to ask the question. It seems like with this drawing that's up here currently, there seems to be significantly sized buildings, 3 in fact, which are devoted to retail. And my question, I have several questions. First, who is going to go in there? What kind of retail? And how is it related to the university, as a university, as opposed to a shopping center?
Sure, the entire buildings are not dedicated to retail, just the
I
ground
understand
level.
that. I can see that on the drawings.
So it's about 17,000 square feet only. So it's a pretty relatively small area.
In the drawings, it appears that those appendages on the front of the dorms are what intrudes out towards Lancaster Avenue. And one of the things I've picked up sitting here is a concern amongst the residents, and I think perhaps some of the members of the commission, of the board, that the monumentality of the buildings is somewhat off-putting. And that's why I question the need to have retail. And again, I ask the question, what type of retail?
Sure.
I mean, the traditional retail, bookstores, selling sweatshirts, that sort of thing, fine. But is this going to be a Subway? Is it going to be a Wendy's? What are you parking out front there?
We intend to put a bookstore and/or spirit shop selling shirts, hats, those kind of things.
Isn't there one of those on the main campus already?
There is. We would relocate it over to here, so there wouldn't be both. Also, the way the students are buying books is really evolving over the last few years, so the book business has really diminished greatly. We're not a warehouse full of all the books that the professors have ordered for that semester anymore. They're mostly ordered online and get delivered to them through the mail system. So the book business is changing, but we do anticipate a university shop, which is more of an apparel store than a bookstore these days. Second, we're considering a convenience store similar to the one we already have in St. Mary's, which serves the student population who lives on West Campus, which are apartment style, so they can buy things for their apartment where they have a refrigerator and a stove and a kitchen. They can do their own cooking if they choose. We're also considering a white tablecloth restaurant that would probably be operated by Villanova. So those are the retail that we're considering at the moment.
Is this a restaurant that would be for Villanova students and faculty, or would it be open to the public?
It would be targeted to Villanova community, but would be open to the public. You know, parents come to visit. They don't have many places to go close by, so we've heard requests for that sort of thing.
And the bookstore and the convenience store wouldn't be better suited on the opposite side where the students are mainly in class? I mean, has that been considered?
Of course. You know, we feel that this would be the best place for it. The convenience store is geared towards the students who live there, just like we have one on the West Campus that's geared toward the students that live there in the apartment-style dorms. These are mostly suite style, so that's the target audience.
Has any studies been done to indicate whether or not that would increase pedestrian traffic across Lancaster Avenue?
We're in the middle of that study now, as you've heard before.
Okay. When do you think that might be done?
6 to 8 weeks.
Okay, thank you.
And John, just one other comment too. The ordinance does provide that those retail uses are intended primarily for the university community. They're not separate uses like a Wendy's where someone's going to be able to drive in. It's really intended for primarily for the university
I understand
community.
that, but concerns were legitimately raised in the past about the high school students coming on campus. And I know they probably come onto campus now, but if these facilities are made easier for them to access, you have to consider the coolness factor for high school students who buzz up the road and go on into Villanova if these things are more readily accessible.
Yeah, they are accessible now. having 5 kids gone through Radnor, none of them have gone on to Villanova's campus to get something to eat.
I have
during the
never
time
seen
there.
a single retail establishment at Villanova. Where are they?
They're in- they're-
I live here.
they're in
Where are
Bartley.
they?
They're in Bartley Hall, has a cafeteria,
Where's Barclay Hall?
and their Doherty has their student union center.
I have to claim ignorance. I have no idea where these
All right, people,
buildings
we are going to move on.
I'm just saying, I've never seen them.
But I'm just telling you, Susan.
You're next, Doug.
None of my kids have eaten on Villanova's campus while they were in high school at Radnor.
All right, you're up, Doug.
All right. Is there, according to what this says, it can be anywhere from 10 to 25 acres. Is that correct? The CICD. Because it has to go through the conditional use thing, what would prevent, say they had one, a CIDC that was, say, 15 acres, and then with the Board of Commissioners' approval, they could easily expand it later on to go to 24 acres, for example. It'd still be within the ordinance. You're not stuck with what they designate initially. Is that correct?
It would be, again, it would be controlled by the township. So
just locking it in there is not necessarily a guarantee that it will stay locked in like that.
You mean that would expand, or that we could expand it beyond, like if right now we would go in for 10 acres or 12 acres and then expand it? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, you could do that.
It wasn't considered. We never considered that,
but the way the ordinance is now written, it's not locked in stone.
I would imagine if they changed the area, they have to come back for a new approval.
Yeah. It'd all be subject to township approval.
Second question. Well, it's a comment, actually. It says, I don't see why it matters whether an institution owns both sides of a street. I mean, I could understand, if it was a court or a local street, or as defined in the Saldo, but even a minor collector.
The reason, Doug, is because you don't have residences across the street from you. I mean, again, what the beauty of this is an island of institutions surrounded by institution. That is why the ordinance reads that if it's owned on both sides by the institution, because you're keeping it away from residences.
I could understand that, but this particular institution also has a major road run through the center of it, arterial road in the form of Lancaster Avenue, and that's a public road. It's whether Villanova owns to the center of the street or not, it's a public right of way. Like Sue here, open space. The visual open space to me is a very important piece here.
See, I totally disagree that looking at a parking lot with cars in it is more preferable than looking at stone Gothic buildings. But again, we could disagree on that, I guess.
I mean, I could see if you turn that parking lot into a park, that would be a much better use of it from my perspective. But I'm sure Villanova's not going to do that one. Okay. I do get. These are public rights of way that everybody uses, not just Villanova University, which is why I know you have a great emphasis on the fact that you own both sides and that you're trying to make maximum use of your land, and I certainly appreciate that because, but it's also a major piece, not only through the township, but all the way from Philadelphia to, is it Lancaster that it ends up? A question: if you have parking spaces behind these housing and so forth, what's going to say one of the kids there doesn't have a car? What's going to stop him from saying, "Well, my friend Fred can park there every day as a commuter"? There's nothing going to
have tags. I'm sorry.
All right.
In order to park as a commuter, you're going to have a tag. If you're a resident, you're going to have a tag, and so designate what parking lot you can park in.
Uh-huh. All right. Could we go back a little bit on one of these slides here? There was one that showed the by right thing. You showed the anvil type of shape, and it had a peculiar shape around.
Other way.
That one right there. You've got the. What is the cause of this? The arc there, if you will.
This?
No, the other side, further out. The arc is non-buildable. No, not the gray area. The ungrayed area to the left of that. Why is that? Is it because of the setback?
This arc right here?
Yes.
Yeah. That has to do with the fact that this is a residential zone that starts over here and comes and has sort of an odd leg extension for lack of a better term. So where the current planned institutional district intersects with the residential district along the SEPTA right-of-way line, that point there is what's driving that 200-foot and 125-foot setback radius. It's a change because it's from a residential property.
All right, I can see that. But so that the trolley tracks, except for whatever they are, they're actually running through residential property or residentially zoned property right there.
There's planned institutional here. There's planned institutional here. This actually is commercial right here, and then you have residential in this zone that has that odd leg that extends out towards this part of the campus.
Not that we would want to do that, but if we were to just rezone that one piece into PI, then you would change the shape of what you could build by right. Is that correct? And move the buildings further from Lancaster Avenue closer to the tracks.
It would change the shape. You'd still be maintaining this line along there.
Right, but the back you wouldn't be forced to go so far away. My point is that from my perspective, these things are just too close to the street. If you stop and look, you're 60 feet. From the front of that building to the edge, is that the line that 60 feet goes to? That's the curb. Is that not correct?
No, that's the right-of-way line. The curb is actually further away than the right-of-way line.
All right. How much further? 5 feet?
I think it was 7.5 feet.
Okay, so it's 67 feet.
Yes.
This room's about 67 feet long. This over here is about from the edge of the white to the center, and from the center out is each about 30 feet. So that distance. So you could be having how tall is this building? 4 stories. That distance from
4 stories along the front edge there.
That distance from Lancaster Avenue to the front of a 4-story building. And in between that, you're going to have trees, and in between, and you're going to have sidewalks. Is that correct?
Correct. And when we're saying 4-story buildings, the 4th story is at a dormer level, so the eave line will be lower than as if it was a 4-story roof.
But it's still going to be 45 to 50 feet tall. I mean, it may not be right on the facade, but it's going to be that height.
It's part of the roof, yes.
See, to me, that's much too close. That does too much damage to the visual open space that you're going to see as you come west on Lancaster Avenue, or go east on Lancaster Avenue from Route 320. Again, to me, it seems as though it needs to be pushed very far back. And I know nobody says you want the parking lots in the back. I would, I think the building massing needs to be further from the street. I mean, that's my opinion, but okay. Again, my major focus is the open space piece of it. All right, now we need public comment.
We can come back to
Actually,
it if you have more comments. Did you have
Julie,
something, Kathy?
could I ask a couple questions?
Go ahead.
Okay. You said that the right-of-way for Lancaster is 60. What is the cartway there? Do you know? And I'd like to know also the right-of-way and the cartway for Ithan, if you have that info. Cartway is 33 on Ithan, and right-of-way on Ithan.
I believe the right-of-way on Ithan is 40 feet.
40? Okay.
In the Lancaster Pike section towards Conestoga.
Ithan is 60. Okay. Well, once we determine what that is, I'm a little concerned with setbacks on Ithan, because I think with the amount of traffic going up and down Ithan, it'd be a good possibility that part of that would be widened. And I think we need to have enough width there so that down the road, if that happens, you have the side yards to maybe pull some of that from. The other couple other things here on heights and everything. I brought this up last time, but I didn't really get an answer. The fly loft on the theater can be above the minimum. And as I mentioned, the fly loft could be pretty much the size of the building or very close to it. Have you considered anything about sinking the theater so that the fly loft would not be as big again as the theater in height? Do you have any idea or what the height of that fly loft would be? Because that could be massive.
Yeah, a full fly loft is typically 80 feet, and the design of the Performing Arts Center has not been done yet to understand exactly what the height is, how far down it could start, or anything along those lines.
So if you actually sunk the theater into the ground, you wouldn't go up quite as high, but if a full fly loft is 80, let's say you can somehow lose 20 feet of that, you still have 60 feet going above the height of the building?
Not above the height of the building. It's 80 feet
From the
total
ground.
from wherever your stage level would be.
Okay, so if your floor is 40, then you'd have 40 above, plus whatever the mechanics would be to lift and cover the roof and all that stuff.
Well, the mechanics would be included in that 80-foot space.
All right, so let's say if the building is 40 and you have another 40 on top, that's huge. So what can you do to minimize that?
It's all things that could be done, could be reviewed as part of the design process.
Well, I do not want to include the fly loft as an exception there. I think that needs to be addressed further and see how it's handled. Okay.
Just so you know that the current code permits a fly loft.
I'm not saying
just
you can't
define-
include
yeah.
it, but I think you need to know what you're looking at.
I understand.
There. It's not like a 10-foot bump on the top of the theater.
Kathy, there's just one thing I wanted to point out. Your earlier concern about the potential for widening Ithan to increase the traffic potential. Even if you don't accept the argument that there's going to be a reduction in traffic since the people will now be living here, just looking at the sheer number of parking spaces, between Church Walk and Ithan today, there's 1,126 surface spaces. That's going down to 147. On Pike Lot, on the other side, there's 577 spaces, and that admittedly is going up to 1,230. But if you add those up, if you add the 600 to the 1,100, you get 17. If you add up what's shown here now, you go from 150, you're at 1,350. It's a significant reduction in parking. So even if all of them turn over exactly the same way, which they honestly won't, but even if they did, there will be less activity along Ithan. So there's relatively low likelihood of need for
I'm not
improvements.
thinking necessarily of widening Ithan the length of the road, but the possibility of adding turn lanes or something like that, so that both right and left turn lanes, so that you can move people through the light faster.
Again, we don't have the traffic study yet to see what mitigation is needed.
I also think that Kathy raised a very good point there, because regardless of the Villanova traffic, outside of Villanova, there's enough traffic to justify some modifications to that road. And I think by not looking forward, that would be a big mistake. And even if you do reduce the amount of traffic, there's still going to be a traffic issue.
I totally agree with you, but again, we're talking about this proposed zoning, which really has very little to do with existing traffic conditions.
Yeah, but you're talking about proposed zoning that reduces the side yards. And if you have
and
nothing
would
for a
prohibit
side
us
yard,
from having future
you really can't
improvements.
widen the road. So I'm looking at it more from...
If I can go back to address your previous question, because I think it was an excellent question and a very germane one. The current cartway on Lancaster Avenue is about 55 feet.
Okay.
And the right-of-way is 66 feet.
So cartway 55 and 66.
66 for the right-of-way.
Okay. And that's a legal right-of-way?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
And then on Ithan Avenue, we measured, just quickly scaled off the cartway at 24 feet at Ithan.
All right.
And the right-of-way that our measurements are based off of is 60 feet.
All right. Hearing that there's a 24-foot cartway on Ithan really points out the need that there's a good possibility that that would be widened at minimum for turn lanes. All right. We'll let the traffic go for the moment. On the parking required under retail, restaurant, and so forth, there is none required under your CICD or on the sketch plan as presented. Also, off-street loading requirements, you're bringing in stores. How could you not have off-street loading? A bookstore, you're going to have trailer trucks pull up. How could you not have off-street loading? And where do they go?
I'll defer the off-street loading. I'm sure that's going to be part of the land development plan. As to the parking, with our extended meetings, there was significant comments that by increasing parking, you're going to basically fill those parking spots. This board, we hear that all the time. You're going to increase parking, you're going to fill the spots. So the thought was not to increase parking significantly, so that to alleviate the fear that we'd be filling the spots by bringing in new students. That was the reason for that. As to the...
Well, I think you're putting your head in the sand if you don't somehow accommodate parking.
But we do have, right now, we have studies that show, that Frank already has, that show we have an excess of 700 parking spaces, not only on peak events, but also peak schooling type events.
Well, if you have excess of that many parking spots, why are you parking people off campus?
We're not, what do you mean parking people
When
off
you
campus?
have major events, you're running buses from
I don't even know if we
the
do
Corporate
that
Center and
anymore.
all.
Do we run that anymore, those buses?
Homecoming and so forth?
Well, by major events, I was talking about basketball games, and
Okay.
football games. Or I wasn't. I mean, homecoming, we
Homecoming.
know, is an issue. Move out day is an issue. I mean,
Okay, well, you
we're
can't,
not- we're not-
I agree with you, you can't always cover everything, but I really question your excess, but we'll let that go for the moment. These are just things I'm pointing up that I think are issues.
Sure.
Did you want to say something?
The loading in the rear of the dorm complex, we have the long driveway, so we were trying to avoid additional curb cuts, trying to keep the curb cuts we have on the larger parcel where the residence halls are. So we anticipate loading out from the parking side, from the driveway where the parking is.
Okay, if there is a truck parked there, do you have sufficient room for the traffic to go by?
We would figure that out when we do the full design. This is just, again, just the concepts.
Okay.
I think the other quick question was, do you still run shuttle buses for?
We do, but they're very little used on home football games, home basketball games. Very few people do. Since we built the law school garage, we have a lot of empty spaces there, so we're running a local shuttle just over there, but still people are reluctant to use them. We think by assigning season ticket holders for basketball specific parking lots, that will help that, because although the main lot is sometimes full, we have 700 or 800 vacant spaces in other lots, so we're trying to better allocate who parks where.
One other quick comment, and I'm not sure if you have an answer or not. I had heard that there is a stream that sort of runs along the trolley tracks back there and goes underground and so forth. And in the plan, you were talking about minimizing riparian rights. So I think it would be good to show where that stream goes.
The stream's on the other side of the tracks, but we could put that in there.
Okay. Somebody has a picture of it there? Okay. All right.
How does your stormwater system impact that stream?
There is no stormwater system today, zero.
Right, the one you're proposing, though, the underground facilities, does it any discharge into that? Like for the 100-year
Well, first, we haven't
storms?
designed it. So the
Okay.
notional design shows some retention areas, which I think would feed the retention pond on the south campus that we already have existing, overflow.
All right, there were just some things I thought our shortcomings need to be addressed. I'm sure you don't have the answers now, but we need them down the road. Thank you.
Okay, why don't we take public comment, and then we'll come back to our comments, because I think other things are going to come up, and we'll continue with our discussion. But I want to make sure we get all the public comment in before we get much further. The first thing I have actually is a memo I received from one of our commissioners who asked me to bring this forth at the meeting. I think he couldn't be here today. This is from Jim Higgins, who's a commissioner here in Radnor Township, and it's basically a request to Villanova for information to get back to him and to the commissioners. He's concerned about the current plan to build a pedestrian bridge at Church Walk, which it is suggested will reduce the current dangers of the Ithan Avenue intersection. He's concerned it's not based on sufficiently strong evidence. Here are potential users of a bridge at Ithan: 2,000 students who live in South Campus, attendees of athletic events at the stadium and fieldhouse, students, faculty, and employees using or visiting from the south side of Lancaster Avenue, the nursing and business schools at the east end of the campus, employees of the dining facility and other buildings on the south campus, and users of any remaining athletic fields south of South Ithan. Whether Church Walk is the correct decision comes down to Villanova's accuracy in predicting these pedestrian habits, and he would like the university to come in with objective evidence that can support their plan. Now, I understand that the pedestrian movement was going to be part of the traffic plan. He's asking for you to produce a study of expected pedestrian habits based on behavioral and other sciences, and to contact St. Joseph's University to inquire about the pedestrian habit experience pertaining to their overpass at City Line Avenue and to see what their experience has been. He also asks, actually Bob's not here, to authorize Amy Kaminsky of Gilmore to get in touch with Kevin Johnson at Traffic Planning and Design and to inquire about their experience in depth. I think he's just looking for more experience and more information about the pedestrian movement. His interest is to allow and require Villanova to make the best decision possible to protect the safety of students, residents, and visitors. That's Jim's statement. So, public comment?
Hi, I'm Patty Barker. I live in Rosemont. I'd like to respectfully request that the Planning Commission require that the traffic study be completed before moving forward. Sounds like you guys are sort of thinking that way anyway. 1,000, there's going to be an increased traffic congestion and pedestrian safety issues, I believe. 1,160 students living 30 feet from Lancaster Avenue, I believe will create more bottlenecked vehicular and pedestrian traffic in an already overburdened area, and will double the current 800,000 pedestrian crossings a year. I also want to point out that almost 1,000 students will continue to live in our communities. I'd like to point out specifically Garrett Hill and the communities that are closest to Villanova. The students that now live in Roxborough, Manayunk, Newtown Square, I think those are the ones that those communities will see a decrease in the number of students living in their communities, but not in Radnor, I don't believe. I respectfully request that all information with regard to this proposed ordinance be available. Like all this stuff that's up here tonight. Is that on Villanova's website or on Radnor's website? No, it's not here. Just wondering, but I would like to make it, I'd like to have somebody make it easily accessible. What I've discovered with both Villanova's website and with Radnor's website is you can't just go and find it. I have to say Villanova's is easier than Radnor's. But what I would like to see is a link on the main pages, particularly of Radnor's, where you go, Villanova, click, boom, there it is. Radnor's is extremely difficult to access. But all these charts and things that are up here, I'd like to be able to spend time looking at and understand so that I can come to your meetings and ask informed questions or have some time to understand what's going on. So that's a request I have, which goes along with something I requested at last month's meeting, which is open, transparent public process. If the public doesn't have access to this material, how do we know what's going on? We expect and respectfully request that all meetings be open, which is what's happening, I believe, and that all materials be available, just as they were during our Garrett Hill process. Under the CIDC number C, designation, there's been a lot of talk about the lot area greater than 10 acres and no more than 25 acres. The next sentence, I think, is pretty important. The CICD may consist of more than one contiguous parcel or lot. I'd like to point out that when I was here last month, one of the things that Radnor citizens have been concerned about is precedent-setting exceptions. How is this zoning change, how will this zoning change set precedent for the second half of Villanova's property on Lancaster Avenue from Church Walk to Sproul Road? And you've already touched on the other institutions in Radnor. I have concerns. I do want to reiterate, we're not opposed to reasonable development by Villanova or any entity. They certainly have every right to build on their property. We just are asking, why should Villanova be granted preferential treatment? So, open, transparent, thank you for all the questions you guys have brought up. Clearly, you're thinking pretty carefully about this, and we citizens would ask you to take your time. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Jim Schneller. Thank you for the work you've done this month. I hope you've all been reading all these proposed ordinances in detail. I have, without repeating myself too much, I live in St. David's and I commute and traverse the area 3-5 times a week. I think there's inevitable growth, and I think that your request for the 5-year plan may or may not have been answered, but you should read it with much concern about the real effects on the community. There's only one Radnor. There are 5 universities and colleges at minimum, and I think you have to have a strictness here. Everyone's looking to you for your advice, and personally, this is my opinion, the Board of Commissioners is much less likely to be stringent. They're going to look at some major issues and rubber stamp it, and not to minimize staff's huge effort in this respect, but staff's huge effort is very bothersome to the public. We see too much effort being done with the institution. We see very little. Another reason for you folks to really stand up. I have discovered that a lot of that huge parking lot, and apparently the area, will drain on Ithan Creek's western tributaries, which means it will go back down under Lancaster Pike and end up past the old Wyeth building and down through the high school athletic field. And I think that there's enormous importance that being placed on runoff quantities and flooding. In this particular zone, I wish you'd place a lot of importance on the particulate emissions that go down the stream every time it rains. Is this development, is any proposed development by this larger density being proposed going to increase the amount of pollution matter that ends up in our streams? You have to remember that Ithan Creek's western tributary runs past the new proposed extended bike trail. It runs down past a golf course, past the swimming club, places we want to keep clean. Finally, with traffic, I'd like to propose, if not always already the case, that the Ithan-Conestoga and Ithan-Sproul Road intersections will be suffering or not suffering, but changed in probably a noticeable way by this. We're told that Ithan won't be changed much, but I think we can assume that traffic habits will change to hurt Conestoga. Conestoga is just getting worse and worse anyway. And PennDOT, I would hope, would really have a better look than we may be aware of. And I've never seen Conestoga look like that ever before. Finally, the institution has, of course, made their plan. Again, would you demand a plan? They're looking at risks. They know the risk of this. They want to do away with the hardship quotient. You, as a planning body, you have a full authority to take a look at why a hardship quotient should be done away with. And is this the way to do it? Is this the particular time or place to do it? Please take a look at the interrelation with this. I know you have a lot of meetings. Could you have a special meeting every 2 months? Could you have 5 special meetings? Could you have it?
We have it every month.
No, to take a look at, you're having one twice a month, but there's no discussion about the interrelationship, about the general ordinance that may be implemented for institutions and this specific change. And that's huge. I would imagine staff has had to take a look at that. So the bottom line is, how do we want to affect precedent? Finally, I also wanted to mention that Ithan Avenue itself is a typical Radnor street, and it is worth the effort that residents and you are looking at. Once you get past Conestoga, once you get past county line, another county, of course, you're looking at an authentic rustic street that's worth all the effort you can put into it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, I just wanted to address the issue on the website.
Go ahead.
We will look at opportunities to make that information more prevalent on the main page. Currently, if you look at the right side of the main page, there's the upcoming meetings. If you click on Planning Commission, there's a link to the agendas. Under that agenda, we'll provide all the information that was provided to the board tonight. That information includes some of the plans and charts that were shown up. Villanova provided a much more detailed presentation that they had not provided to us previously, but any of the information that we get from applicants, whether it's Villanova or any other applicant, is put up under the agendas for each of the meetings. We
And
will
can you
look
also
at other.
post another notice again saying that the model is here? I think a lot of people would like to see that.
Yes, so we're going to look at other ways to make that information a little bit more prevalent on the main page, or at least a link specifically to that.
And Kevin, after the fact, like after tonight, the people that are seeing this at home have about 30 seconds on the screen, and then it goes to the person speaking. I'd like to see this presentation very easily accessible on the website as well, as just like the Villanova button at this point, if we can do that.
The university has updated its project website with materials through the last meeting, and this presentation will be on it by within the next couple of days. So it's current as of all the materials that we've gone through, various presentations, the zoning amendment submission, things like that. So if there are other materials that are requested, I'm happy to put them up there. But as best we can, we keep this website, designconceptforlancasteраvenue.com, as a central resource for all of the materials that we submit and present.
Thank you.
Chris, if you could provide that presentation to me, if you don't mind, I can also put it up on our website. Thank you.
Is there any other public comment?
Hi, I'm Cheryl Tamola. Hi. When this process started, I made comments about the desire to kind of separate the students from their the heavy car emphasis that goes on at Villanova. And I made a presentation about an article that was in the Planning Journal about how many of the higher end schools are making that effort because their students have more global awareness about not driving everywhere, et cetera. And yet in this concept, I don't see any real connection to, we've talked a lot about cars tonight, and nothing about using bicycles or facilitating bicycles and pedestrian transit other than the bridge. I noticed when one of the pictures, it looks as if you're going east on the north side of Lancaster Avenue, when you get to the bottom of the bridge, you have to walk all the way back to the church and come back out again. It doesn't, it seems like you're somehow inconvenienced by the pedestrian bridge. So I just want to say that maybe we should press for, I know that I pressed before to have them do car share or some kind of, zip car kind of thing, where the students don't need those cars there all the time. And I do want to remind you also, this is another aside, that Villanova is the largest employer in Radnor Township. So the amount of traffic that you see is not necessarily just students. And as we bring more of them onto the campus, there will be more need for services and more employees to service them. So that population will also expand. Thank you.
Thank you, Cheryl. Any other public comment?
Good evening. Bob Escrow is my name. Live on 46 Aldwyn Lane, and just wanted to start off with first the spirit store and the bookstore. And it's just my opinion that it's on the wrong side of the road, that where it is now, it's centrally located. And I think that with it being in the proposed location, you're going to find a lot of people that are going to want to come across Lancaster Avenue, whether they live in the south, whether they live at the West Dorm or attend a function. I would also raise where would alumni and parents park to go to that store and to those other restaurants. And my understanding was that there was a push to get cars off main campus or the center of campus and bring them out to the outer side, and I'm afraid that will happen. Regarding the current parking garages, I would propose that they go much higher with those current garages. If they're going to go and raise them by one level, let them raise them 2 levels and reduce the proposed parking garage along Ithan Avenue. Right now, I think one of them near the infirmary is only 2 stories, and why couldn't they go 4 stories there? It's surrounded by the infirmary, Ithan, and the SEPTA R5 line. So I don't think that would impact many residents at all. Impervious coverage, I thought I heard earlier tonight that impervious coverage was going to go down. But I would propose that I have no idea whether it's going to go down or up because of the 250 spots that are added along the green space behind those houses and all the trees that are going to come down with it. So I would say that the impervious coverage might be a net effect of even. And I would throw out this equation: increase in density, decrease in setbacks, increase in buildings equal increase in traffic. Okay? I just find it very hard to believe that we're going to get a decrease in traffic with increase in density, decrease in setbacks, and increase in buildings. The students that will be moving from off campus on campus, people are going to backfill those homes, and they're going to have cars. Now, not all of those are going to transgress through the intersection of Lancaster and Ithan, but I would imagine a lot will. So I just don't see it being a traffic decrease. And in any traffic study, I would just appreciate having in it the amount of times that the 4-way red light at Ithan and Lancaster is controlled by a police officer. Right now, it's way too often controlled by a police officer, and that tells me that right now that intersection's broken if you have to have a police officer control that light. And is that need then going to go away? Right now, there's a stay-away factor. And I believe one of the board members or members had mentioned how when she pulls out of her area, the line of cars. Well, there's a stay-away factor. The stay-away factor is I'm going to stay away from that intersection. I'm going to use Conestoga Road and just not go near it. I agree with the commissioner's letter that, in my opinion, I think that the crosswalk's in the wrong area for this project. I think that the crosswalk serves partially the south dorms, how students come up from there, and it also serves this project, but it also leaves the Lancaster and the Ithan issue still out there. I did hear an excess in parking, and that may be true, but for an event, people want to park close to the event. So there might be an excess in a different area of the campus. But for instance, people are now parking at the R100 station for sporting events. And that just tells me people want to park close to the event. Even though you might have excess far away, that's not where the desired person wants to park. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Julia, there was somebody who was waving a photograph back here of a stream when I mentioned that. I was wondering if we could see it.
It's Tish Long. I live at 35 Aldwin Lane, and these are pictures of the stream on the north side of Aldwin Lane.
If you put them on the table, he can put them up on
sure.
the board. Thank you. You want to face yourself. Have the picture face you. Okay. There you go.
This picture, it's taken from my husband's iPhone. It clearly shows South Ithan. Can you see the water? No. The water's right here?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. The next shot is taken from the parking lot, the road being South Ithan, and that is the bridge, and behind it is the South Dorms. Right here is where the stream is. Here is the next picture, which shows, this is the street level from South Ithan, and this is very self-explanatory. I will also note that the water as of a few hours ago, was very polluted. This is quite large. Here's another view. Again, this is right street side. And the next one is the view from the parking lot. My husband actually had to sort of climb up, but there again you can see the stand of water, which really goes almost the length, I believe, of Ithan, correct? Here's another roadside shot. Now this one is a view that it's taken, this is about 100 yards west from South Ithan on the parking lot side. So again, it really runs parallel to the parking lot
Okay,
on
if
the
we could
north side.
put up the overall plan, if someone knows how to do that, so we can see on the plan where that creek is.
Well, I gather that there was a talk, I'm not here, Kathy, to say yes or no, that the water was really not on the side that really is.
Thank you.
While Nick's pulling it up, could I actually make a request of the applicant? I wasn't kidding around. I really would like to see an entire Villanova campus. When people reference these other parking lots and these other, I do not know Villanova's campus. I may never have been on your campus. So if we could get it emailed or just, you guys are showing this is the whole campus. It's not the kind of, I just don't know what buildings are, where these other parking garages you guys are talking about.
You want something more labeled, more detailed a little bit?
Where'd you get this?
There's
Oh, there you go.
Okay.
So, Nick, where's that
I
waterway?
assume she's right here. Here's the P&W tracks here. And I assume she's talking about the back here. It looks like she had, here's the bridge.
Okay.
So I assume she was referring to this area here. You see where my pointer
No,
is?
I think I'm better giving a verbal direction if I could, Nick, if I could just have the mic for a minute. If you're coming from the light at Lancaster and South Ithan and making a right-hand turn onto South Ithan, at that point you're bisecting the two large parking lots for Villanova. As you go down the hill, before you hit the bridge, if you look right to your right-hand side, that's where the water comes in. That was the first picture that I showed. And that's the indicator.
I think this area here is what you're, at least on the plan, you're talking about. Here's the bridge.
Right, it's right.
In this area.
No, it's not on that side. It's on the north side.
This side?
It's
You
on
mean
that side.
The east side.
Well, yeah, the east side. Okay, gotcha. Okay. And I will say, because we're now also, we also have Pico in our backyards too, currently at the moment. And all of the Pico, they sort of have built a boardwalk, as I would describe it. That's all very muddy and very boggy right now at the moment. So we clearly have a water issue on both sides.
Thank you. Okay, is that it for public comment? Great. We as a board, we do want to say thank you to all of you who've come out tonight. We don't do that often enough. We appreciate that you're here. Even those of you who are here to learn and to listen but didn't have anything specific to say, we do appreciate your involvement and that you came out tonight. Back to the board.
Can I comment on a few things?
Go right ahead.
Okay. First of all, with the concern about filling the dorms, I personally do not share that concern. I'm sure that once they're built, they're going to be filled. But that still leaves, I think by my numbers, 840 expected off-campus students. I guess the question is, how many of those students will be provided with the opportunity to park on campus? And
Will they be commuted?
do they all get parking on campus?
They would park in this lot. Matter of fact, because we were talking about this western lot, and remember we were talking about using the bridge, the concern about using the bridge. This western commuter lot, this would be the commuter lot here. So the people would be driving to this area.
Yes.
And the bridge is right here. So the way they would get to campus would be to cross the bridge at Church Walk here.
But you expect to offer all of them parking if they want it?
I would assume you would.
Yes, we offer
Okay.
all the commuters parking.
And that parking area that you're talking about now, Is that included in your percent impervious in these documents that you gave us for the proposed? That is part of the 70.85%?
So on the documents you have in front of you, it includes
this one
everything,
here.
everything that's,
The chart.
the chart
Yeah, okay.
reflects everything that's kind of highlighted in orange here.
So that doesn't include that parking for the commuters? Does
No,
not.
it does not include that
Okay.
parcel. That's correct.
Could we have that calculated as well for
Sure.
us? Let me see, I kind of forgot some of the things I wanted to mention. So I guess my concern is that we haven't seen the traffic. I'd like to see the traffic. I would also be concerned that we are increasing the allowable impervious cover under this ordinance, even though you're proposing a reduction.
In the existing, yes.
So I don't really like that what we're putting in the ordinance itself allows for an increase or increase over what's allowable now, but also maintaining. So maybe you want to work in a reduction in there since you're providing one anyway. And that just goes to another point, and I don't want to be kind of hassling you about this, but really the burden is on you to fix all those. It really shouldn't be us saying, hey, you're not really using this, so why are you putting it in there? Like, I would have liked to seen that was cleared up before it came before us, just to make it less confusing for not only us, but the public. It gets very tricky.
So you'd rather see the actual equal.
Don't put anything in there that you don't anticipate a need for. That's just my recommendation.
We understand the difficulty since we haven't designed it.
I know. I do understand. But some of the huge disparities, I mean, the 10% here and there, that's one thing. And I understand you're trying, time-wise, you're trying to move things along. So with the traffic coming in as it comes in, I understand that. But I don't want to feel pressure to act because we've seen you twice before, but we haven't had any of the information that we're truly looking for. Because for me, it comes down to it's not about a visual. It's about traffic. It's about impact to the neighbors. I know you're going to provide most of the things these students need, but there were some good points raised before about just recreational areas and things like that. I hope you're thinking about that when you bring that many new people into that community. Yes, you're providing their housing, their parking, their laundry, whatever it is, but think about those other things that may tax the neighboring community as far as recreation. And it's so timely because we didn't just enact that. Because it is a concern for the township, open space and recreational areas for residents. And again, it was a good point with the bike paths. Maybe you can incorporate things that will motivate people to use that pedestrian bridge when it's, at least when it's of their convenience. If they're in a hurry and they're trying to get some place on time, they're going to take the shortest route. But if you kind of develop that as for when people have if you're going to buy something at the bookstore, per se, you're not in a hurry, you can take your time, let's direct them somehow, motivate them to use the paths that you're putting in place.
Our goal is to get them to use the bridge.
I understand.
We've spoken to St. Joe's and Princeton, and it's difficult.
It is difficult. And I think you have started at least by getting it at grade on the one side. And I don't know if you can dip down to grade and come back up again before you cross over the railroad to make it where people on both sides don't have to use stairs. I don't know if that's something. I didn't really look at the grade. I don't know if that's feasible. But and I agree that, Ithan, it may need some improvements. I don't know if that's going to maybe something that you could throw in to your offer to make this thing work. And it's not necessarily your students that are the traffic issue. So that's another reason to see the traffic study, because the peak, I don't know when that peak is. I don't know if the peak has anything to do with students. It could be just it could be your employees that are causing that peak, not your students themselves. So that's the kind of thing that down the road, just having the information would make it easier for everyone when they're making these decisions. Because I think there's really two things that you're asking for. You're asking for flexibility in your impervious cover, and you're asking for flexibility in your setbacks, as well as your building heights. So all of those things result in an increase in yield for you. Now, what are we getting in return? That's my question. How are you going to offset that? Because for us, we wouldn't be serving our community properly if we were to allow that without some kind of mitigation of that. And I do understand that bringing the students on campus is a good thing for everyone.
Right.
So that's one, but that's just, you need to show us more.
So what do you have in mind?
I don't know. What can you offer us as far as open space, recreational space, things that would enhance the community, as well as a commitment to not go elsewhere and build more. If you can somehow balance it so that you show us that overall your campus will not exceed what's allowable now. If you could do that, then it's an even trade. That's an easy one.
Okay.
To wrap up, or did you want to say something? Go ahead.
Actually, to just tail in on what you were saying, Regina, we're working on PI, and someone mentioned that we should be integrating PI and this. We're talking about taller buildings in PI where we get ground that's dedicated in a conservation easement. So we're talking about a thing that Villanova might be able to do, ground that's dedicated for perpetual open space. We're talking about the height of buildings, when we're talking about setbacks there. So it seems that Villanova is asking for double the density that this site would otherwise permit, but we talk about looking for trade-offs, and by no means have we finished PI. The trade-offs might be that you give up some construction rights in other parts of the campus. We talked about getting cars off of campus, and that perhaps Villanova doesn't address it the right way. An ongoing program perhaps to give a 3% or whatever tuition reduction if you do not park on campus and do not get your hang tag. As over and above paying perhaps, or I don't know if Villanova students pay. I know employees supposedly pay to park on campus. But if it's neutral for the students, then an incentive not to have a car would tend to drive some cars off of campus as well. I also noticed that the township staff and had preliminary discussions and asked for 2 bridges over Lancaster, and that there's only one on the plans. Is there an engineering reason as well as an economic reason, perhaps, why?
To be perfectly honest, and I was at all the meetings, I really don't recall. There was a comment. I can't say the township as a whole asked for 2. Some people did ask for 2, but that was not like, we want 2 bridges.
I think
and
2 would be a great idea.
That's not going to happen.
Is it not going to happen because of the economics or the engineering?
The economics. And also the engineering, because our studies have shown it's just not going to work at Lancaster and Ithan because of the way everything scatters.
And it only works at church?
Well, you have to remember, too, we didn't get into, drive past Villanova in the morning and see where the kids are walking. Drive past South Campus and see where the kids are walking to school. They are mainly walking down Aldwin. I would say a majority, at least what I've seen. Now, again, I'm not standing out there taking numbers, but what I've seen is most of the students in the morning who are going to class, and I've been there in the morning, are taking, Aldwin and crossing over at the P&W and going that way, because we've stated before, and I don't know if you were part of this presentation, most of the classroom space is on this area of campus. Again, Frank will do the study and he'll be able to
only having one bridge doesn't necessarily make it user-friendly for the community either, though. I mean, for those of us who access Villanova, and I love living near Villanova. I grew up in a college town. I went to school where there was one college in the town. I like using Villanova. Having that bridge all the way over there when I want to go up and use a facility on this side is not very easy to do. And I do see how many kids are crossing and how long that crossing light is. And it'd be interesting to know the numbers, the differences. And I know that studies have happened. It might not be from your professional staff, but I know that these senior engineering children or students are doing that on campus, and they have some interesting numbers that there's not necessarily a big disparity. So it'd be interesting to see what they found and have that more public.
I think there might have been a miscommunication earlier. We actually have conducted a study which included counts of pedestrian crossings both at Church Walk, at Ithan, at all 17 intersections, in fact, that we were asked to count. And I even had informal conversations, I believe, with Mr. Norsini and other people on staff who've all commented that it seems like it's been an evolution with South Campus students. And basically all of the people that park in the main lot on the western side to use Church Walk more as a conduit to get to the main part of campus. We have hard data. It's data that anyone can collect, students, anyone on the PC who wants to go into the counts can see that there's hundreds of people that cross at that location. So what's happening today is you have 577 spaces on Pike Lot. You have 1,126 spaces in the main lot. Anybody who commutes and parks in Pike Lot is actually going to be obviously going to be incentivized to cross at Ithan and Lancaster. Anybody who parks on the eastern half or the eastern third of the main lot will also be incentivized. Anybody who parks in the western side crosses at Church. A lot of students who actually live in South Campus cross at Church. In the future, that entire parking lot is gone. It's now a 147-space parking lot. It's almost negligible in terms of how much commuting traffic will be there. It will be none, in fact. It's going to be the residents. And they're going to be naturally have an affinity to go toward Church Walk as well. That just leaves the parking structure. We know that that's going to be a repository for the students who own cars that will be living there. And since those vehicles won't be moving and since the people won't be getting in and out of the cars, they'll be getting in and out of the building, we think there's going to be a significant dynamic change in the attraction to Church Walk, not even withstanding the fact that there's academic buildings that are closer to that, but just the fact that everything I just outlined seems to pull people there more. There's also a huge advantage in the way the grades are set up. We currently have the St. Thomas and the campus itself is raised a few feet above Lancaster Avenue. There's a natural connection for the Route 100 crossing, which is the other end of the bridge. It's going to be a lot easier to get the people from South Campus to want to go that way. If we wanted to put a structure, if we could afford to put a structure or whatever at Lancaster and Ithan, there won't be a demand for it because there won't be as many people there, and there's going to be very little incentive for anyone to use it, even if they were there, because the grades aren't favorable. It's just hard to get people to go up and down steps. Traffic is like water. It takes the path of least resistance. So this is all still an evolving thing, but that's a pretty hard conclusion that we've gotten to so far, and I don't think there's been too much that's been argued with as far as that goes. And just before I sit back down, the traffic component I can see is a huge issue. And it's been a huge study. And we've had 2 deliverables. The first one was submitted, like I said, in January. The most recent one 8 or 9 days ago. I can make a commitment to the PC members tonight that as soon as I get comments back on the second deliverable, what I can do is instead of making a third deliverable, I'll just go right ahead to the final study and try and get that turned around prior to the next PC meeting. Obviously, it won't be enough time for staff to actually have an opportunity to review it and give comments to the PC, but I could at least come here and present on it. But I'll need some time to do that, so hopefully I can get the comments back in like a week or something to give me at least a week and a half, 2 weeks to put something together prior to the next meeting. But keep in mind that since the study is so enormous, I could stand here the whole night talking about it that night. So I'll try and keep the focus on what's the critical issues, and if maybe the PC could give staff, who in turn could give me, some focus on what you want to hear about that night, that could be the focus. Thank you.
Go ahead.
My last comment is I want to see a response from the Delaware County Planning Commission before I take more steps on this from a standpoint of a recommendation.
We will look at getting that to the County Planning Commission. I can't guarantee that you'd have comments back prior to your next Planning Commission meeting.
I think we've gone as far as we can go with the information that we have. We're all still frustrated about a lot of points. I think we've touched on all the major issues. I can't think of anything we've missed.
Well, there's one thing I'm looking for. The areas you showed us grayed out that you can build on, can you quantify the amount of square footage you can get out of what's buildable there for us,
Under the current zoning.
under the current heights and everything?
Are you talking about the current parking lot? Regina's over.
You showed us those 2 parcels that you could build
The
on.
Anvil?
The current.
Yes,
The current
yes.
parking lot. We're not referring to other spaces on
No.
campus.
Just what you showed us in that grade area. Yes, that's the one. Can you quantify the amount of space you can get square footage with what's allowed now?
I don't have the square feet, but we can get about 200 beds of dorm style of.
Yeah, I think
don't
for
have the
us,
square feet.
like beds doesn't really come as easily to understand because it is significant, the change. I mean, it really is. And then that's really, again, what I'm asking for is whether it's dedicated open space or something to offset that increase in yield.
Okay, so here's what we need. We need the. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I just would like a rundown, only because I don't have my zoning book with me, what our current guidelines, restrictions, what have you, on height limitations for some of these accessory structures that they have listed.
That's in here.
No, it's not. In the, that's not the one I'm talking about. I'm talking about,
That's not the height slide.
no, it's the, Peter, when we talk about chimneys, spires, elevators and stair equipment, penthouses, tanks, fly lofts, antennas, towers, all that stuff, what are our current limitations? It looks like it's page 2 of 3 of their zoning comparison sheet that they gave us.
I think if you look under height definition, I believe in the zoning code, building height is 280-4 of the zoning code, not of the proposed ordinance, of the zoning code itself under building height. It refers to height, and it talks about flat roofs, chimneys, and it says, that chimneys and spires shall not be included in the measuring height. Elevators, stair, equipment, penthouses, tanks, air conditioning towers shall not be included. So the building height in the definition in the current zoning code doesn't put a limit on how high they can be. It just says they're not included in the height, which means there is no limit.
Peter, what's your interpretation of fly lofts, antennas, uninhabited towers, and parapets?
Thanks for hold on one second, Susan.
That's fine. I don't need that tonight. I'm sorry. Let me clarify.
One of the things we need to get in the
That's
next
what I want
round is the
That's
staff comments. Okay.
That's my point. That's the piece of information I want.
The other
Thank you.
things we need are, we want to see the build-out, a possible existing build-out out of current zoning for the orange area. All right, we mentioned that. We want to get the comments from Delaware County. We want to get the traffic study. We want a summarized, concise version of the traffic study that will talk to both the vehicular changes and the pedestrian changes that this would entail. We want the ordinance as written to match as much as possible the proposed design so that there are no gaps that we have to wonder what's going on here. We want the firmer limits on and definable area so that this cannot happen anywhere else in the township without, a major process. And one thing I would like to put out, we talked about, what is the township getting, because this would be an incredible increase in density for Villanova. I have no answer to this, but I would like to see a creative solution to some of the problems in Garrett Hill. Because of the student population in Garrett Hill, that neighborhood has all kinds of problems with parking, with traffic, with nuisances. We hear about it all the time. The township on its own can police that area, try to keep an eye on how many kids are living in a building, but there's only so much they can do with management. If Villanova could come up with a creative solution to take some of the pressure off of Garrett Hill, that would be one of the best things you could do for our township. Any other major?
I just want to make one comment. This is still very ambiguous, everything here.
Sure.
I think you might want to consider waiting another month before you send it to Delaware County, because it would really be difficult to comment on without spending a tremendous amount of time on it. And I think we need to get it firmed up a little more and get all those things you just went through get that stuff done before you send anything to Delaware County.
Kevin, why don't you give him a call? Tell him what we're doing. Ask him if we can send it down now. If it looks like it's going to be a problem, we could wait. But if they can do it and we're willing to do it, I'd like to see it.
Yeah, it'd be fine if they are. I'm just looking at.
But that's a good thought.
I just thought the theory was, you make your comments, we fix up the ordinance, and then send it to Delaware County. I think that was the intent, to do it, so that they're not reviewing something that's vague and nebulous, that we would have everything in there, or at least a lot in there, before they would review and make comments back. But I think that was the intent, Skip. I understand.
Well, I think we're asking
my
them for maybe a
point.
preview.
Yeah.
My point is that they have layers of expertise more than we do. I mean, we're getting lots of expertise on Villanova, but they may have done 15 colleges. They have staff that we don't have. I mean, I'm sure they have, ways to do this that are much more sophisticated and probably helpful. And if not, we can accept or reject their recommendations too, but it would be another layer of scrutiny.
But my point is, we have 4 columns of different measurements here. Let's get some things to agree first and get it firmed up a little more, like maybe everything that we just asked for tonight or a good portion of it, and then send whatever that finished or somewhat finished project is, then send it to Delaware County, because we're not going to make a decision on this within a month. There's too many unanswered questions.
If I can address Susan's question.
I just was adding it to Julia's list, but thank you.
I would say antennas, uninhabited towers, and parapets are not currently exempted under our building height requirements. And so those 3 things are being added as exemptions. Everything else is specifically exempted. Because currently in the PI zoning, it's 38 feet for all buildings and structures on building height. So
I'm not sure I understand you. So a fly loft is not part of the structure, or it is?
Well, a fly loft is not specifically listed in their height requirements. I'm assuming their logic is that a fly loft fits under an uninhabited tower, and therefore that's why they're exempting the uninhabited tower, because that would exempt the fly loft. Nick, if I'm missing a fly loft somewhere, okay. That's where the fly loft falls in. So I would disagree with what they're saying, that fly lofts are currently exempted. I say they're not currently exempted.
Thank you.
We would just get a legal argument on that.
Well, can't the theater department move to all digitally created sets at this point, and you really don't need a fly loft?
I'm sorry. Oh, okay, fine. I don't know.
And if I can I just want to kind of focus the Planning Commission and try to point out you need to separate plan review from ordinance review. What you're doing here is you're reviewing an ordinance. Now, they've provided you with a plan to kind of try to show you, give you something more to chew on as to, okay, if you adopt this ordinance, this is what we hope to build. But there's a lot of land development issues, that a lot of which has been brought up tonight, such as turning lanes on Ithan at the intersection of East Lancaster, that are really those are land development issues. And no matter what you do with the ordinance, those land development issues will still have to be dealt with in land development. And that just because if the Planning Commission decides to, and the Board of Commissioners ultimately decides to adopt this ordinance and pass it, or adopt something, nearly the same, that doesn't guarantee they get to build the plan exactly as they're showing it to you now. And that's one of the reasons why I think they said they want a little wiggle room on some of these numbers, is that they recognize that when they actually fully engineer this plan, something's going to pop up that they didn't expect. There's going to be some problems, and they need that wiggle room to build the plan. Now, you don't have to give them that wiggle room. You don't have to give them anything. You don't have to give them whatever they're asking for. But just recognize that, just because you guys, the township decides to adopt this plan, that doesn't mean they're approved. They still have to go through the land development process. And all those questions and all those issues we deal with on a monthly basis with every other land development, you're going to deal with this one. So you're going to have a second bite at the apple. Just recognize that.
That was the reason I was thinking in fact, this is the time to take it to Delaware County. Because I actually, at a very basic level, want to hear the county's perspective on this notion of, because an institution owns both sides of the street, that we should be drastically reducing our setbacks. And to get wrapped up into making the ordinance match Villanova's specific plan is exactly what I don't want to do. I still struggle with, how is that not custom zoning? If the ordinance is written to fit a plan, whether or not they specifically stick to it, and so that's why I do want to see comments and let it stand the way it is now with 5 foot and 10 foot and all these numbers that they've thrown out to us, and hear what somebody who doesn't live and breathe Radnor might think about this process, because we are all very, however we land on the thoughts about Villanova, whether we're neighbors or taxpayers or not or whatever, we are all very emotionally invested, and I think a perspective from down at the county would serve us well at this point.
And to your point, Sue, they're going to get what we just got. They're going to get these charts. They're going to get this plan, I hope. And we've been asked to comment, so we're asking them to comment.
I didn't think they would get that. Wouldn't they just get the ordinance to read, Peter?
Well, they get whatever we submit to them. I mean, they don't have to read everything we give to them or what the applicant gives to them, but yeah, if we want to give them more, we can. And if they want to look at it, that's up to them.
Sure, come on up.
This may be being picky.
No.
But you're sending this to the planning department, not the planning commission. The planning department in Delaware County, as you know, are professional planners, and that's the look you want. The planning commission is a more non-professional set of individuals.
I thought the letter we get always says DCPC on it, though.
Yeah, Delaware County Planning Department.
Oh.
I think that's what it says on it. At any rate, it always was when I was on the planning
I trust Kevin to send it to the right people.
Yeah, I think he will. I'm pretty sure he will. But I just thought that, I mean, when you talk about it, it should be clarified also.
Thank you.
So that people don't misunderstand.
I had to really agree with what Cheryl just said there, that it's the department that reviews it, because the commission itself does not get into the detail that we get into, nowhere close to it.
I think there was another public comment in the back.
Good evening. My name's T.J. Latoff. I'm 1 Barley Cone Lane. I live right next door to Villanova University. What I'm hearing is kind of upsetting me a bit. We're bringing all these students in, and we move from 2 bridges to 1 bridge that we might not even use. Well, this is defeating the whole purpose, because you're bringing people in that are not normally there, and they're just going to be flooding the sidewalks. So you have to have other ways for them to ingress and egress. It has to happen. And you have dorms on one side of Route 30, you got the classrooms on the other. Something has to be done. The traffic, for one thing, subjecting the students to the traffic is awesome. It's wrong. So we need bridges. We need other ways to get them across, back and forth. The other thing I'd like to say is, you're bringing students here. They're going to be walking into Bryn Mawr. I haven't heard any plans being made of facilitating that, from them going from the school to Bryn Mawr and back. You go down Route 30 eastbound, you run out of sidewalk on the south side or the north side at Lowry's. Okay, so right there's a bottleneck. Once you do that, the sidewalk, if I'm not mistaken, the sidewalk from Lowry's on down into Bryn Mawr is not as wide as my sidewalk. It's about half that width. So you're putting more traffic on a smaller area that's not meant for it. So,
Amy, does the traffic study look at the pedestrian access into the Bryn Mawr from Villanova? Do you remember?
Frank, did we go down that far? I believe that we did pick up anywhere that we had pedestrian traffic that was occurring down towards Bryn Mawr.
I'm not sure exactly what constitutes the pedestrian study, but we counted pedestrian activity at every crosswalk, at every intersection, during every time that we conducted counts.
All right, so we are going to take that into consideration in the next step.
Okay, and can I add something else? Possibly Villanova has a lot of, Villanova has a lot of equipment, and I was wondering if they could possibly take that little bulldozer they have and run it down to take the snow away off the sidewalks to help us, and also help their students safely travel to and from Bryn Mawr.
That's out of my purview.
I know, but that might be something to consider because you are putting more pedestrian traffic there. So that's putting a bigger burden on us. I'm a corner house, so I have a huge stretch of sidewalk that I've got to clear. And once the plows get done piling up the snow, the salt, and everything else, trying to get through there, you almost need a howitzer. So possibly they have I saw a little bulldozer they have, or that little tank. They could run it right down, and it takes no effort whatsoever. That would be a nice thing to do, I think, to help us and to help the community, and also help secure the safety of the students. And also in your study that you did conduct, that sidewalk past Lowry's Lane. Did you notice that that's very narrow?
Yes.
Good. So they're going from a very wide sidewalk to a very small sidewalk. And then they're going from a very wide sidewalk on the north side to no sidewalk on the north side. So we have to consider the safety of the students. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And I'm sorry, Joy, just one real fast comment if I can roll away. Remember, currently, in these parking lots, we have commuter students who are crossing Lancaster Avenue to get to class. Right? So it's not like all of a sudden you're creating this. I think
we understand.
Aware of that. Okay.
We're there. Do we need to table, or what do we do?
Yeah, table it.
Can I have a motion?
I move.
Second.
I move that we table this application until next month.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Is there any old business? Any new business? Thank you all.